Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Town Council Budget Workshop for Thursday, April 25th, 2019 for the fiscal year 1920 budget. Please rise for a moment of silence. Of the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Fishbein.
Here.
Laffin.
Here.
Letourneau.
Here.
Marone.
Here.
Morgenstein. Here. Shortell. Testa. Zandri.
Here.
Chairman Savoni.
Here. I expect Councilor Shortell momentarily. I am pretty certain there are questions for the Board of Education. Do we have questions for the cafeteria budget? Yep.
Oh, I do. Yeah, I have one question.
Got it. Questions for Youth and Social Services? Mr. Turner, we appear to, at this moment, have no questions for you, but I'm going to ask again one more time before I invite you to hit the highway. Questions for Parks and Recreation? Don't run out yet. I think there are going to be questions for you, but it was rather quiet. So with that, we will get started with the Board of Education. Just as an update, Mr. Turner, you are dismissed. Park and Rec, you're staying.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Please, you're getting good at this.
10 years into it, hopefully. Sal Menzo, Superintendent.
Roxanne McKay, Board of Ed.
Dominic Barone, Business Manager.
Would you like to start with introductory remarks or proceed to the
I
questioning?
think you all had a copy of this. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I think that the continued challenges that we face are the uncertainty of funds from the state of Connecticut, especially in reference to special education costs. Our special education numbers continue to rise in terms of the students that we have to service and oftentimes the complexity of their disabilities. So as a result, that is a number that continues to be volatile. If you do recall, we did put forward to the council last fall the idea of taking the unencumbered fund balance from a year ago, put it aside for special ed overages in the event that we had any. And the good news is we haven't had to tap into that fund, but we do believe that still we need to keep it there because it is such a volatile line item. So that's really the main situation, because part of that is we get a grant called an educational excess cost sharing grant, which allows us to get funding for students who have higher than average expenditures based on their educational needs. However, that grant, that percentage of reimbursement, is not always a number that we can rely upon. And 3 years ago, if you recall, the state cut our budget in the fall of October. they cut it about $330,000 at that time that we had to make up for that year. So we're always kind of leery about the special ed numbers in terms of finances, but we're constantly monitoring those. Just today, we had another staffing meeting regarding special education. We do have some additional outplacements that we have to budget for because the students would be better served in terms of their needs of disability in other facilities. So we constantly monitor those, and I think that's one of the challenges when it comes to our budget.
Thank you. Questions? Councilor Letourneau.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just a couple of questions. First one on your green book that you were just talking about. I don't see the page number, but it's on the probably the second page in a budget message summary. And you have the remove and replace 8,000-gallon oil tanks. And you have Cook Hill, Mary Fritz, Highland, Pond Hill, Rock Hill Elementary, DAG. So it comes to 475. Oh, I'm sorry, the DAG was the roof replacement.
Correct.
Okay, but the other ones that came in at 75, how did you come up with those figures?
That's from past experience. We have done some oil replacements before. So our maintenance director works with purchasing to look at what was previously bid. These are estimates. So again, they could either be up or down depending on what we find also when we have to do the excavation. So this is based on past history. But again, we make it very clear when we share this information with the mayor ahead of time. We make it very clear that these are estimates at this point.
Okay, because
Are you concerned they're high or low, John, or?
way high,
Okay.
enormously high. Just going back to some construction experience I have, unless you run into a horribly leaking tank and you have to do a major remediation, then you could go over this.
Correct.
And anything's possible.
The
But
good
if it's-
news, the good news about all these are that these are estimates that we have to go out to bid for. So the reality is you're not spending this money until we actually have bid documents if it's approved to move forward.
But it's in the budget.
Not
This,
the
No,
operating budget.
This is not in our operating budget. This was a special request that the mayor approved
okay,
to use capital funds for.
okay,
So this is not in our operating budget.
okay. That's good. Okay, because that just jumped.
Sorry for
out
that
at me.
confusion.
All right. The other thing, probably a little more touchy subject, but with special education, has there ever been, I think I talked about it once before, but is there any way to get the parents to contribute towards some of their child's, or is this all on the town?
That would be against the law. There's federal law, the IDEA law, that basically dictates and governs what the responsibilities are of a school district. So a student attending public schools, it's the responsibility of the school district to offer what they call the LRE, the least restrictive environment. And the least restrictive environment sometimes requires us to add additional staff that might be above and beyond what we already have in our system, or it might require us to look for a different facility for the student to utilize. There is not a burden on the part of the parent. That would be in violation of the federal law. So it's up to the school district. What the state does is they offer for a student, say for example, the threshold is $75,000. And if we have a student who goes out of district at the rate of $100,000, the state will pay us 25%, say for example, of the $25,000 above the 75. So we would get a portion of that money back. That's how we call the excess cost. But there is not an ability under federal law to transfer any of those expenditures to the family.
Okay. I just find it disturbing that as time goes on, it seems like we're getting more and more kids with emotional needs, so to speak, And that can go into a lengthy debate, but where does it stop? At some point, it's got to stop where it becomes the responsibility of the taxpayers to take on this burden, because, I understand there's federal law, I understand there's state law, and I don't want to see any children left out or that are truly in need. But on the other hand, I wonder about some abuse to the system, where these kids need maybe more home discipline or more parental guidance. I'll go with parental guidance. Roxanne didn't like my first.
No.
So, well, I'll be nice, parental guidance. And what's happening is it's coming back into the schools to let you guys handle this. But it's the taxpayers that are paying for this. We're paying for what parents can't do. And I just wonder where it's going to stop, or if it's going to stop, or just every year this is just going to balloon and grow and grow.
I would just have to say that, and I don't have children of my own, I don't have a special needs child of my own, but no parent, and I know you already know this, goes into having a child and hopes that their child unfortunately may have a disability. It's a sadness, it's a loss for that family, and it's a loss that doesn't go away ever, because their child is perceived as different than others. So I believe we're fortunate that the vast majority of our families approach it from that point of view, that they see what we can do for them as a gift for their child, and a gift in a positive way, not a negative way, a gift for their child to make him or her be as successful as possible. So I don't necessarily feel that we have a significant abuse of the system. I think the challenge comes in that a lot of, if there's any discussion about concern, it's about sometimes the resources that we have to procure for individuals. So for example, outplaced facilities, that's sometimes a concern of ours, that we want to make sure the student has, and we were obligated and we're willingly offering a great service. But sometimes those facilities, knowing that they offer that phenomenal service that we could never, there's those checks and balances that we want to make sure that we have. So actually this Monday, we're starting, which we do every few years, my business manager, Dominic, and I are meeting either in person or doing phone conference calls with all of our outplaced facilities, talking to them, not trying to bargain or negotiate because it's about the students' needs, but just sharing and understanding how they develop their budgets, how do they develop the increases in their tuition rates, how can they, having them better understand that if they're increasing their tuition 5% and we're getting a 1.73% overall budget increase, we just want them to know, again, not taking away services for students, not getting into any of that conversation, but just having that candid conversation with some of these facilities, because they don't, unless they're asked to have that conversation, they're not going to. We did this a few years back, and I have to say, we were pleasantly surprised. The facilities held their prices for us because they recognized that there was a need to do that for communities. I don't feel I should have to do this, but I do feel I have to do it because I know it's not happening. So I think that those are some of the things that are challenging. But I think our families are doing the best they can. I really do. I think there's challenges that many families face, and yes, unfortunately or fortunately, we do have schools that can step in. One of the challenges that we do have, and we've brought this up before the board or the town council as well as the mayor, is Connecticut is one of very few states that have what's called the burden of proof on the school district. The burden of proof, that what that means is that if there's a special ed need of a student, the school has to prove basically that what they're going to offer is of an appropriate standard for that child. If a parent doesn't agree with that, then we have to go through a legal process called due process. Mm-hmm. And the burden lies on the part of the school district. in most districts, the vast majority, well over 40 states in the United States, the burden lies on that of the family. The family to disprove that the district is not offering quality service or appropriate service. So that does sometimes, I think that the advantage that provides, not necessarily to the family or to the student, but to some of these outplaced facilities, because they know that they have a resource that schools can't provide for every child. So that's something I continue, and I know I'm not alone on this. My colleagues across the state as superintendents continue to try to stress to our legislators, because that's something that the state of Connecticut can change, but it's obviously a very sensitive topic. I'm not looking at it because I'm trying to be cheap or trying to cut budgets. I'm just trying to suggest that we need to have balance in the equation.
Oh, absolutely, because like I said before, I mean, this is just ballooning. I see it every year. It's getting bigger and bigger, and there's more and more kids that are coming up with more and more problems from wherever. And, you know, I just don't want to see our I said it before, and I'll say it tonight, that our schools go from, you know, an institute of education to a healthcare facility. And I just don't want, you know, that, it bothers me, because I've seen it over time. Maybe I've just been around a little longer, but I've seen it. And how did it happen? How did this happen? And I know there's been some good done, but with, like everything, with good, there's bad also. Mm-hmm. And, you know, how do you balance that? So, that's my shtick tonight. Thank you.
Counselor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, all.
Good evening.
You know, I didn't expect to get off where we are. I think I've discussed this before. You know, I have a niece who's severely autistic. And, you know, one of my fellow counselors, I saw him last week explaining about the spectrum, and, you know, that it's not on or off, and it's gray, and it comes in different, you know. My niece is 14, and she's basically nonverbal. She expresses through grunts. And, you know, she's great on her iPad and the iPhone, the iPod, all at the same time. And it's fascinating for me to sit in a room and watch her, because I can see that brilliant little child inside of a shell. And when that decision came down a couple of years ago, Chef V. O'Neill, and the judge said that we shouldn't be spending money on special education children. It was difficult, because my niece, through the process as it currently exists, which through my experiences I support, is transported every day about 50 miles from where she lives to the school, because at the school that she used to go to, they weren't giving her any attention. And now, while for regular children, it's, you know, we put on the refrigerator when they get 100 on a test. With my niece, it's if she can eat pizza or she can swim in the pool. It's amazing. Because all people want to be able to do is to be productive.
That's true.
And we see children, I see adults that have Asperger's. They're able to work at Stop and Shop or ShopRite, and I make sure I go through those lines. Anyway.
But you know, Craig, first off, you know, I appreciate the sensitivity of the subject matter, and it's very personal, clearly, for you. And you raise a really good point that the transportation cost alone, never mind the educational cost, that we obviously want to supply that for all of our students, but that's even a misnomer for us to understand what it costs potentially to transport our special need population appropriately. And for folks that aren't familiar with children of special needs, that could add a significant amount of expense to our budget that we don't always necessarily know, but it's absolutely the right thing to do. And that's another component. It's not just the education, it's the transportation. There's many components, as you know firsthand, for us to service appropriately this student population. And we want to do it. It's our obligation and it's, it's appropriate. But again, those are costs that we need to absorb, and you don't always know them when you, when an IEP is written for a student, exactly what does that entail in terms of the needs to appropriately and service that student educationally, but on all, that transcends just educational. It's transportation, it's other areas that, again, we're not going to shrug our responsibility, and that's not what I'm suggesting, but more for TV land, for people to understand, it's so complex for the families and for us as a school district to do all the right things for all the right reasons.
So, from my perspective, the answer, because I wear a few hats here,
Sure.
is I've been pushing as much as I can in the minority for regionalization of special education, because I think that's, collectively, I think it would save us money. It would take those stars that teach the special education, around the state and, collectively do this. But, there's, as you guys know, there's a lot of moving forces that I have to deal with. So that's the goal, and I understand the challenges in this budget with regard to that. So, with that, because I got there, I've got to now go, let's deal with this. So, substitute teachers. Where is it in the budget? And how do you forecast and,
Well, I'll have Dominic find it in the budget, but I'll explain how we forecast. We look at, there's a variety of different substitute teachers. There's obviously your teachers that are out sick, so your traditional substitute, and then there's long-term substitutes based on, it might be long-term disability, it might be maternity leave. So what we do is we do a trend analysis. Usually we look at a 3, a 5, a 10-year trend analysis, looking at what have in each of those categories, how many substitutes have been employed on the part of the school district by school, by level, and then district-wide. And then from there, what we do is then we calculate our projections. We have a very unique thing in Wallingford in our teacher contract, which I think you all know our contract pretty well. This is again for TV land, but our contract, when a teacher is out for a longer period of time, say a maternity leave, in most districts, a substitute goes on the teacher's schedule at a certain point. In our district, they don't. They stay on a sub schedule. It's just at a higher rate of pay. But in terms of calculating how many subs we project, we look at all of those factors and we do the analysis. Some subs are curricular subs, so we do, if there's planning and placement teams that we need for special education, those are one type of substitute. It might be curriculum for curriculum writing, it might be professional development. So we have all the different categories and we look at the trend analysis and then calculate our figure from there.
so where can I find those numbers?
It's on page 30 of this document.
Of the
It's a subcategory of the certified salaries, the 111. So if you go to certified salaries, and you go down about 3 or 4, you'll see substitutes there.
Bless you.
You got it?
Yes, I do. So I see 3 components, which I would multiply times bodies, persons, teachers. I have short-term at 80, long-term at 100, and 125, 60. So what is that multiplied by to get to 700,000 is basically where you're at?
Which basically, we take an estimate of
Do you know how
the
many
cost.
do you know how many it's
No,
multiplied by?
I could provide that to you after, though.
Okay,
I can
so
get it, but
there's
know that that's just, the 80, 100, 125 is just, that's to note the pay scale.
Yeah.
It's not like certain are 120, it just depends on how many days they're in there.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a
Just want to clarify
component.
that, yeah.
There's three different kinds of individuals
Correct.
in this line.
Correct.
Some are at 80, some are at 100, some are at 125.
Correct.
And it's whatever component, those number of people time the 80, and that makes
Correct,
it.
based on the trend.
So, my concern, once again, putting on the other hat a little bit, is this family leave program that the state's talking about that may impact this line significantly.
Correct.
Where, do you have any projections as to where we could end up? Because that could impact in this budget.
Correct. We have projected, we didn't include them in our budget, we didn't inflate this, I shouldn't use that, we didn't add the money in this line item to anticipate that increase. We did consider that with our contingency, not 100%, because we are concerned. That's getting a lot of momentum, as you know. That conversation, I was at a meeting this week. So we based that off of our projections of long-term. We took a percentage of the long-term number to figure out what that percentage might be, but we didn't take the full, just,
Because all of those people are potentially at 12 weeks. That's
Correct.
12 weeks of sub, so that would put you at the highest scale
Scale.
for a substitute.
correct. It's a burden, I mean, as you know. But again, we had to, just like I know when the mayor presented initially, he said about the teacher retirement, to choose whether or not to put it in or not. This is similarly something that we had to consider. So we took a conservative route, knowing that, again, if we had to make an adjustment, like we do every year, it's kind of like if we get another line item cut from the state, we'll have to make the adjustment within the budget, and that's our responsibility. But I didn't want to over
I know.
budget either.
Okay, so the other thing is the 1% account.
Sure.
Is that what you were referencing originally with regard to the special education costs, and that you could use that money?
Correct. We, a couple of years ago, when the state, we were concerned because the state had come back and said that they were cutting that $330,000 in October. So the following fall, we came to the council, which was last fall. We came to the council and we said that we wanted to take $700,000 that we had carried over in the 1% from the prior year and allocate that for special education overages if we happened to see them. We didn't want to have to come back to the council and say you need to find money somewhere else. We were trying to be proactive in that regard. We did, just so you know, full transparency, because we were working with the mayor on the insurance account and we were helping keep the reserve at an appropriate level. So we do have, we took remaining money that was left over from the other 1% accounts, and then took approximately $50,000 from the $700,000 to make up the $100,500 change to offset the insurance. So that account now, the present uncovered fund balance is approximately, in that account, is about $650,000. But that's still there. It could be changed, the purpose could change, but right now we want to hold steady with special education.
When you say the purpose, I thought we passed an ordinance that directed, I don't know, I've been up here for so long. I mean, not a complaint.
No, don't worry.
I thought we passed
good.
an ordinance giving some sort of guidance as to what it could be used for and procedure and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we did. We said it couldn't be used except we initially, the original ordinance, which I think goes back to, I forgot, 2014 when we started doing this, 13, 14, we agreed that it was not going to be for reoccurring expenditures. It was only going to be one-time expenditures. The statute that was provided by the state, the provisions were actually stated in 2012, which said a town could allow for reoccurring expenditures. But we came as a board and said we didn't want to go down that road because that then underfunds your budget the following year, and then we have a spending cliff. So the town ordinance that you all adopted was for non-reoccurring expenditures.
I think we need clarification here. We never passed an ordinance on that. That is a resolution that's passed annually. And once it is passed for the Board of Education, they can use it for whatever purpose they feel is appropriate. There's no control on the spending of that. Number one, there's no ordinance, but no one is bound by anything. The Board of Education determines how that money will be used. Now, if I'm wrong on that, please correct me, but I don't believe there's any ordinance. That's an annual resolution that is passed. Every year that has to be passed anew for the end of that fiscal year.
I don't have my ordinance book.
Every year, we have to come and request that the money is carried over, and we do that.
Well, and that's
And-
the question, because I guess you guys don't know, but the House, was it 2 weeks ago, changed the 1% account to a 2%
Yeah.
account and added
But that isn't
you
official
guys
yet.
as the gatekeeper function. No, I know. And that's the question about whether or not we have to, you come to us
Gotcha.
and we open the gate. Because the language only mentions you guys.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of
And
that.
I know
language.
we've worked together on this.
Yeah, no, we're on
Yeah.
the same page. I mean, understanding what, the
But
same
I'm
page of understanding.
concerned about that, because I agree, capital expenditures, we've talked about capital expenditures. And I want to work together on it, and we have worked together, but I want to make sure that that's the ongoing. So I was told that you need to have a local ordinance, so if that's the intent. So I'm going to look into whether or not we did that. There's some recollection, we'll look into that, but anyway.
So can I ask a question to
Yeah.
that end? Is that specific to if you wanted to go to the 2%, or you're saying even if you retain at the 1%, you need a local ordinance?
So the statute says that you can put aside up to 1%.
Right,
So the legislature increased that to up to 2%.
correct,
And then it said the money can only be spent by authorization by the Board of Education.
right.
Didn't mention mayor, CFO, anything. So, anyway,
Okay.
so the last thing was, the, Councilor Turner was asking you about the oil tank removal and the roof.
Mhm.
And it's not in the operating budget. Where is that money coming from?
When we meet with the mayor in March,
Yeah.
prior to him setting the budget, we also have, for the last 3 years, or actually longer, 4 years, we've offered him some capital items off of the strategic plan to consider. And so at that time, when we met with the mayor and Mr. Bose, we shared that these were our priorities. So when I received the phone call from the mayor regarding the 1.73% increase, in addition, he said, in addition to the 1.73, he would allocate capital funding or recommend capital funding for these projects.
And my question is that coming?
Not from the Board of Ed budget, that would be a question for
Is that
the,
from the CRA? I don't recall seeing that in my review.
There's no program yet. I mean, typically, we don't fund that until there are bid prices. So have to be an effort of putting out the bid
Absolutely.
with the appropriate specs, the work to be done, and then once we have that total, we'd come in for appropriating funds, whether it be by borrowing or cash. I don't know at this point. Depends upon a lot of unknowns.
Okay, so it's right now just a gentleman's agreement that there'll be intent to get these things paid for.
absolutely, and we've had a great longstanding.
Okay, that's why when I heard the exchange and it's being paid for, and I'm like, I didn't see that, but anyway.
No, you'll see it because we have to go out to bid and then you have to approve it as the mayor.
Understood.
So we'll come together and present it.
Future thing, got it.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Mr. Bose, Mayor?
Just one other clarification. I think the superintendent mentioned funding on the health insurance, and that was money that was indicated in the letter that you have. I think it was something like $200,000. 50,000, what was it? No, 250,000. 100,000 from education, 100 from general government, and 50,000 from the utilities in order to reduce the health insurance increase from 10% to 9%. So I just want everyone to understand that's a separate category.
Thank you. Mr. Bose, the 1% account and then the reserve that was created from a earlier 1% account, to potentially fund special education.
Yep.
Where would we find that in the audit?
That's in what they call the assigned, it's part of the assigned fund balance.
Okay.
We refer to them probably incorrectly, but they're called carry forwards. It's the same thing. It's called 1%. It's all. It's the
Okay.
Same category of funding.
Thank you. Mr. Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I just have a couple of quick questions for you. So, on the transportation conversation that's been going on for a number of different things, I'm curious. I'm curious on a couple of things. One of the things that I never even realized till this year is that we don't have the ability to have students be removed from bus routes. In other words, students that turn 16, 17, get their driver's licenses, they're not on the bus anymore. That's why that new bill is
being introduced. Correct?
right. Is being introduced, and I don't know how much savings you might get from that. Does anybody even have any idea how much that might be?
To be honest, we've discussed this. It's going to be nominal. I think people have really kind of maybe romanticized the value of that, because the fact is our contract is based on our elementary runs. Most elementary students do take buses. Now there are some exceptions, but most of them take the buses. So in reality, I don't think there's going to be as great a savings that people may anticipate. We might save a bus or two. I'm not thinking we're going to save 10 buses. So maybe 2 buses, $90,000, $45,000 a bus. I think that's usually what we're going with, which is still good money. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to excite people if that passes, that we're going to be able to have these. We're still going to have buses with few high school students on it, unfortunately, because we're going to already own the buses and we're going to use them.
Right, because you're by default, even if they're not making the high school run, and even if they're sitting out the middle school run, they're being leveraged across the elementary school run, so you're
Correct.
still paying for them.
And the thing is that you can't really, we talked about this also, that it's very difficult, and feel free to chime in, is that it's difficult to write a contract with a new bus company saying we only want you to provide the elementary runs and we're going to do a scaled salary schedule, because they're not going to get people to work, 10 extra or 20 extra people to work only a short portion of the day. It's hard enough now to get bus drivers to work the full day, never mind now reducing their hours, because with that would come other things that would be reduced in their compensation.
Another, and this is probably just as minuscule, but I mean, I have to ask it only because I get asked the question a lot.
No, it's
from parents and other irritated drivers. I get certain conditions where it makes sense for the bus to stop at every third house. On busy streets where there's no sidewalks, I get it. What I don't understand is where I've driven behind the buses myself, and I've seen the bus pull up to the corner of Hosford Street, literally cross the intersection after picking up a child, stop at the second house past the corner, and then 3 students come out the doors, and these are middle school students. And I want to be able to go back to the people that have complained about this type of thing to me. Why do we allow that?
Again, every situation is reviewed by, actually Dominic is our transportation director as finance director, also with our transportation clerk. There's a variety of reasons, it's a laundry list. It could be, student issues with medical, and again, it might not be seen to the naked eye, but there might be an issue. There may be other issues in the neighborhood that we have to be monitoring because of other challenges that have occurred, in terms of some residents that are on certain lists that we have to monitor. So there's a variety of things. It's never a clear-cut thing. I wish we could say A plus B equals C, and that's why we stop. There are a myriad of things. And
I guess, I mean, and I
it's
try
not
to
a good
be
answer, but it's...
No, I know, and I try to be as sensitive to stuff like that too, but I mean, anybody that's with me in traffic there is going to say, here's girl number 1 on the corner of Hosford Street, and they go through the intersection and they stop again and they walk out their front doors. They're not even waiting. And it's 60 degrees in the morning. I mean, and I can see where people get irritated about it. And then people think about the money, the time, the fuel. I mean, and it all does sound very minuscule, and there was always the other side of the argument, like, don't we have bigger things to worry about? But if we can't go after the small things, and we have problems tackling the big things. So, and I honestly would rather have them come to me for smaller things that I can answer rather than having them go to the transportation folks, you guys, or whomever else, for things that might be bigger for you guys to handle. I like to be able to answer them. So
I get at least several, 3 to 5 phone calls a year about that same question, and unfortunately, there is not a definitive answer. The town I live in, I am on the bus route to go to the high school. I know there's like 5 kids on the bus, but I'm stuck behind that bus too. Unfortunately, it's, again, not a good answer. It's very frustrating, but the reality is that we do have to make accommodations for students. We do not just very arbitrarily or capriciously add bus stops. There's thorough review. We have the bus services who have to go out with a safety crew. They have to do an analysis. We have to look at lines of sight. We have to look at distances. We have to look at conditions of the road. There's a variety of matrices that are used. Sidewalks, if there's sidewalks, if there's not sidewalks. There's a variety of things. So it's not a perfect perfect answer. I understand people's frustration. And I experience it too. Believe me, if I'm trying to go across town and thank goodness we don't have the half-day kindergarten schedule anymore, because that was a whole nother challenge when you were trying to get across town midday. So it is a challenge. I totally recognize that.
no, and I appreciate the candid answer. So my other question that I have is the tuition line 560 on page 65. That actual number for this present year at 4.5 goes up to 5.3. That's like 18%. Can you kind of identify what that line is again and why it went up so much?
Can you tell me the page number again?
I'm in the big book and I'm on page 65.
Are you
Well,
in
I don't have it with me,
which,
but I'll
the
just find-
town
I
budget
know what
book?
it's-
Or
Yeah, the town budget book, yeah.
Okay,
All right, but I'm just gonna,
Object 560 down.
yeah.
yeah, thank you. I mean, that's gone up because we've experienced additional outplacements, and also we anticipate certain tuitions going up.
So can you again kind of refresh my memory on what that tuition is? Is that the people that come in the VOAG?
No, it's the people it's the Wallingford students that are going either to a private or a public placement. A different school, could be ACES, could be Benhaven, could be.
So
So this is our residents that go out to other
Correct.
schools.
And
Okay.
that's strictly tuition and potentially if there's additional services required there. The transportation's on a different line, it's not.
To specifically go through it, you have, for example, we have Wintergreen Magnet School. We have, which we've reduced. We're down $120,000 there because we have less students who are applying to go there. Next year we'll only have approximately 35 students. When I first arrived 10 years ago, we had 60 students. So we're down drastically there. It's also our Thomas Edison School, which we consistently have 17 students. We were 21 when I first arrived. Our special education outplacements, the estimated increase is $391,000 for students going out of district. In addition, we have our private outplacements. Those are our public outplacements, and then we have our private outplacements, which we estimate going up $192,000. And then lastly, we are anticipating a decrease in our excess costs grant from the state that I mentioned before of approximately $283,000.
So when you say private outplacement, so I understand like ACES and Wintergreen.
Those are public.
Right, those are
Because
public. So
those are
can you give me an example of what a private one would be?
Benhaven, Meliora, Edelbrook,
Got it in stereo.
High Roads, there's probably 10 to 12 at least different ones.
And we're on the hook for those budgets as well.
That goes back to the initial
Yeah,
conversation.
yes.
It's based on the student need.
Student need.
When you look at our graph, you'll see that, and we broke out public and private outplacements, and we showed how many students are in each and the cost. You'll see that our public outplacement cost has gone up, and our private outplacement costs have somewhat stayed the same. The thing is that if we've transitioned with the support of the families through the PPT process, the legal process, we've transitioned students from private outplacements, which tend to be more costly, into public outplacements. That private outplacement line, if we were to have maintained those students in private outplacements, that would have gone up, continued to go up. So we've tried to work with families, again, meeting the appropriate needs of the student, to help mitigate an increase in both areas. It's not easy, but again, we're required, and it's the right thing to do for the children.
And a little bit more on pupil costs. So I know I've asked this question years gone by. How much have we changed on what I would call maybe tuition? If we had to send a bill to everybody for exactly what it was to have your child in a school system, how much did that change year over year?
Year over year, it's nominal. We're going.
Were you held it
less than
pretty tight this
$1,000.
past year?
Yes, and we do have 2 students who are paying from out of town that have chosen to come to Wallingford Public Schools. We have another student who's coming from Cheshire to Wallingford next year for we're calling it private school.
And do you have that rate handy with you tonight? If not, you can email it to me like you did last year.
Yeah, I could email it to you.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's in one of these folders.
That's okay. You know what? Email it, because I just like to keep a running record of that myself.
Sure.
But,
Not a problem.
and then I do have a kind of a side question to that as well. Do we have an established parameter as to who gets to go to school? And what I mean by that is, just like a Connecticut resident that lives half the year in Florida has the ability to kind of register their car in Florida, pay their taxes down here, what about students that split their time between Wallingford and another town, whether it's parent or grandparent? Is there any delineation on at what point they can say, gee, I'm entitled to go to school in Wallingford, and what is that delineation?
Oftentimes the challenge comes obviously when there's families that are when a student has parents in 2 different communities. So you go to what is the legal custody agreement, and you look at it. It has to be more than half the time, sleeping more than half the time during the week. So the fact is that we look at those legal documents, we identify whether or not the student is a resident of Wallingford or a resident of another town. So that's really, we have statute that has to, that really dictates that. And we also have a statute that dictates whether or not students can live with another family member in our town. If the sole purpose is for education, they cannot do that.
And how do you prove that? Because I've had people come to me that have said, I know so-and-so is staying with grandma, but they don't live there. They're using grandma's address, and I mean, so what's the recourse then?
Well, we have a variety of things. First of all, we require an affidavit that has to be notarized. And if the affidavit and the notary is seen to be, illegally identifying the student as a resident, we could take that up with the court. We do utilize the police department and police staff, community police, to actually monitor residence of students. So we will sit, resources outside of a house to see whether or not the student gets dropped off there in the morning and then gets on a bus in Wallingford and figure out where they come from. So we do investigations. We do usually between 5 and 10 investigations a year. I would say that this past summer, my job was residency officer for Wallingford Public Schools. I spent an enormous amount of time dealing with residency matters, addressing it. We had students who wanted to come in from the board to advocate that they stay in our district, but I said, you don't live here, you could pay tuition, here's the amount. I had to do that. I also, because I'm somewhat of a sympathetic person, tried to help people find houses back in Wallingford because people were getting, it was financially, they weren't able to stay in their present residence. So I referred them to the real estate organization in town and and we were actually helpful in getting a couple of people housing to stay with their children in Wallingford. The other group that people don't understand, and it's very confidential, of course, are the students who are homeless. There are students, we actually, for the first time, in, I think, the history of Wallingford Public Schools, we are eligible and receiving $30,000 a year for under the McKinney-Vento Act, which is for homelessness. So we have a critical mass of homelessness students in our district. So those students also sometimes look funny to a citizen in the sense that, why is that student living at someone, I know they really don't belong there, why are they there? Or why are they taking a child that lives in Meriden back to Wallingford? Well, if the student's initial residency was Wallingford and their displacement ends up being Meriden, their nexus to come to school is Wallingford Public Schools. So we have a responsibility, and we usually share the transportation costs with Meriden or with Durham or with whatever district, but they're required to come to our school. They could choose to go to the school that they're now residing in, but 9 out of 10 times the students want the constancy of being with their friends. They want to be there with their friends. So there's a lot of different layers to this, and we are addressing it. Our principals, our secretaries do a great job. We've really, and I have to give credit where credit is due, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, Carrie Latour, has done a phenomenal job revamping registration procedures for families, making sure that we have all the necessary proofs and documentation. We do kindergarten registrations. I'm usually the one who makes the mistake. She usually corrects me. And we make sure we're really dotting our I's and crossing our T's. Is that to say we don't miss a student here or there? I can't say that. I don't think there's a district that can't. We just got to refer to a student from another town they realize is living here, that now I will assume the responsibility as a school district to educate that child. Just this week, we got that. So it's not easy, but we do follow state statute. We try to impress upon people that if we catch you breaking the law, we are going to. That's what the affidavit says, that we will prosecute you if necessary. But we have a very good relationship with the police department as well, and they've been very supportive. And oftentimes when we do find people who maybe are bending the rules, they realize, okay, we need to move on. And they recognize that that's, unfortunately, we love the fact that they want their child to come here, but you have to be a resident in order to do so.
Well, and I
Or
think
pay
that's,
tuition.
I think that's a good answer for me to go back to people with. I mean, we're not gonna catch everybody. That due diligence effort is being made, because again, it becomes one of those conversations where, just like the other one, don't we have bigger fish to fry? But sometimes you gotta understand the mechanics. If there's just enough people
Absolutely.
that are in the system that don't belong, that's another teacher that we have to hire.
Absolutely.
And we, it's on our backs collectively, and it ends up being, and we all want to do the right things, and we all want to see that the next generation of kids that are coming out of the school system be those types of adults that are at least self-sustaining, but also helping to make better communities. But it has to start with a fundamental of following the path, following the rules, and these are things that you got to tie it back to the parents. And I think that was a little bit of what Councilor Letourneau was saying earlier. At what point are we making the parents responsible? So for the things that they're teaching indirectly, maybe even to their own kids.
The one other thing I do want to mention, just because you might go out and share that and somebody says, well, wait a minute, there's this child. We do, and we've had a long-standing policy prior to my arrival, and I believe in this, that if a student moves after January 1st, they are able to stay in the school district until the end of the school year, because of the fact that it is disruptive to the student. Oftentimes it's a student who's in their senior year, his or her senior year, to have them go to another high school at that point, to graduate with a class that they didn't know. I think that is a humane thing to do, and I think we do well with that.
Is that senior year or any
year?
All
Because
right, but that's policy, right?
But the following year,
Yeah,
they're gonna have
following
to go
year.
to their next.
Oh, and they get the official
district.
letter, and we follow up, and we make sure that they've unenrolled and that they have their records transferred to another.
But that's equal policy.
But
So
I
that
just
could
want
be anybody.
I just want you to know,
Yep.
just because inevitably some people say, but I know this one student, and you'll be like, oh, Sal didn't tell me the whole thing. So I just wanted to give you that.
No, I appreciate that, because that helps me follow up with that as well. All right, well, those were all the questions that I had. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Counselor Shortell, I still can't talk about school buses. You're on.
Well, my 8-year-old is obsessed with the school buses with the flat fronts where the engine's like in the back. I don't know if you can comment on that, Dr. Menzo.
Does he ride in one or not?
No, not that one. We see them in the looper lines.
There you go.
Right. So I'm going to start with a mea culpa, and Sal knows this is coming.
That's right.
You knew it was coming too. So there were 2 contracts that
Right.
I said they were wrong. I was wrong, not the contracts. There was an insurance clause, and it involved RX costs that I
Sorry,
didn't
what do you
realize.
do for a living? No, it just.
It is. It was an Obama era change in my defense.
Wow.
And Councilor Fishbein made me ask the question, so
Oh.
maybe he could have been more up on it too. Okay.
Did you say Janus language? I'm sorry.
Did I see
No.
what?
Oh, no. Oh, boy.
You said the unencumbered balance is 650,000. I just want to make sure I got that number correct.
Right now?
Right
No,
now,
that was from a previous.
Or is that the 1% account?
That's the previous 1% account, the unencumbered fund balance, right?
For special ed.
The previous one I was talking about was the special ed one that was from prior years.
Right,
So
okay.
that's the, it's actually 647,973.
Okay.
So we haven't touched that. This year's unencumbered fund balance that we have presently for the 18-19 school year is 829,081. In your budget booklet that we provided you, you'll see, and I believe it's on page 24?
26.
Oh, 26. If you go to page 26, the balance was there, but then what we provided you actually, it's not page 26, excuse me, it is page 25. We provided you what we plan to purchase, like we do every year. And you'll note that most of the items that we're looking to use unencumbered funds for, as has been the case in the past, is technology. The technology refresh, I think that's become our somewhat of our tradition, because we don't keep it in the main budget. We look at it as something that if we have the money to do it, we do that in the future. So on page 25, you'll note that we have replacement of servers, student computers, Chromebooks. Those are key things, elementary devices, projection systems. We do include musical instruments, because we want to make sure we do that. And then we also have our voice mail system, which is outdated, that we have to upgrade. Classroom projections, again, teacher laptops, and so on and so forth.
And also sometimes there's some facilities upgrades that wouldn't be met under, they're small enough and not
Capital.
long-term,
Yeah.
that they don't fit under
Right.
that capital expenditure. So-
The one thing that we did bring up this past Monday night at our board meeting, just to share with you, that we are looking to also potentially recommend to the Board of Education an efficiency study for our schools in terms of energy efficiency. We had done one back my second year here, and we're ready to do another one to look at whether or not there's additional cost savings to kind of get to, I don't know if we'll ever get to a net zero environment in our schools, but at least we're closer to that, especially at our elementary schools, and because there's 8 of them, and try to save some money along the way.
Thank you. School resource officers, I know we do have an arrangement with the police about how many, they're rotating among the 4, the 2 high schools, the 2 middle schools.
Yes.
About how many hours a week in total do they spend?
They're daily in terms of their time, unless they have otherwise been assigned a professional development opportunity or something to that effect. But on average, it's a good 3 to 4 hours daily that they're going in between. They have a schedule that they work out with the principals. They're going between the middle school campus and the high school campus. They've been phenomenal. We ask them to collect data for us, and that we share the data with the Board of Education on a regular basis. The relationships, as we had assumed, it was our goal to develop those positive relationships, has been by far the #1 benefit of the whole experience. So it's been they've been incredibly supportive. Sergeant Blythe has done a great job allocating the resources, and the chief, I can't say enough about.
Especially
in a positive way.
Especially because he's paying for it, right?
Well, potentially, but also
these
just our
resource
collaboration.
officers even attend
Sporting
athletic
events,
events. I mean, they go above and beyond what is required of them. I mean, that's how committed they've become and entrenched in the school culture.
Right, which is what
if
you want.
will.
That's-
And the other piece that you don't necessarily, and nobody would see, is the deterrent factor, but and not even by a dominant force, but just through conversation, the impact that you potentially have if you choose to vape or whatever. So you can't even quantify those things that get thwarted just through conversation and saying, do you really think that's a good idea? And what are the pros and cons? And those kinds of things. They can quantify how much time they spent having those conversations, but a lot of good things come out of that because it forces students to say, yeah, what are the consequences? Maybe I shouldn't do that.
Right.
So it's
Definitely.
powerful.
Definitely. Okay, totally unrelated. If I were to look at like ERLA assessments for the current 3rd grade across the district, because I believe this 3rd grade was the first class to go through full-day kindergarten. I believe these are the first back in 15. So if I were to compare early results of this third grade with, say, a third grade from 5 years ago, would I see a difference?
I would have to get you that data. I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I'm good.
Well, that's okay. Well, I was just saying, 'cause that was one of the selling points
Yeah.
of full-day kindergarten. So now we've had full-day, and I was for a full-day kindergarten, I still am, but it kind of ties to the special ed discussion for me, because there was an argument back then, actually by one of the other board members, that full-day wasn't the answer, that we should be specializing and focusing on the children who need help the most, and that's where that money should go. So I'm just curious, now that we're
Well, I think
3 or 4 years in, I'd like
Yeah,
to see data.
I think we do both. To be honest, I don't think we threw one out with the other. We do still have a significant amount of intervention services at all of our K2s, pre-K2 schools. So we have 3 interventionists at each of those schools. We have our special ed services are of high quality. We have low caseloads for our teachers and our students. Our service hours are relatively in a good place. We always are constantly looking to improve upon that. I think in terms of the ERLA data, I can definitely get that for you. I just don't
That's fine.
have it off the top of my head. Sorry.
Usually you have the answers, it's like,
Yeah, that one,
Like
I
the-
have to say,
you're like a
I don't
robot.
want to go out on a limb because I also have Miss Latour in the audience, and if I say the wrong thing, I want to make sure that I'm saying the right
That's
thing
fine.
with her. But I know that, I think there were other ancillary factors, as you know, about full-day kindergarten. It was, yes, obviously, when we wanted to increase our opportunities for students and their growth in the area of literacy and numeracy, but it was also about the social emotional
Right,
piece.
right.
And I think that is an ongoing challenge, and I think that we would be in a very different place right now as a school district if we didn't have full-day kindergarten and we had the behaviors that we're seeing in our system, and not just in Connecticut, but across the country and even around the world. I think we would be in a very different place with the amount of resources we would have to put in our schools to address those behavioral issues. I think full-day kindergarten has provided some of those environments that students didn't have in the past. They didn't have the socialization on a regular basis. They didn't have as long a time with their peers. So it has provided that opportunity. So we have seen growth in that area. I think that was the other piece. If you remember when we did the presentation, and I remember there was the fateful night that somebody talked about play, and it became almost a negative word,
Right.
and it's a real positive word in the environment of schools. And an environment of especially a kindergarten classroom. So I think, again, we wanted, obviously the indicators for success are not just social and emotional, we want the academic, but we can't lose sight of the social and emotional piece as well.
No,
But I'm sure we could.
I'd be curious to see it, but I
Sure.
agree, I hear what you're saying. It's a more holistic than just an
Correct.
ERLA data point. I just want to go back to the special education and tie it back to grant funding. Can you just talk about, of all the money we spend on special ed, how much of it is grant funded? Roughly, I'm not looking for.
Well, it depends, because like we have the IDEA grant, that's about $1.3 million. No, yes, 1.3, because we're just ready to submit that. That offsets some of our staff costs, approximately that amount, to be honest, the 1.3 million. So we get the IDA funds there, and then you get your excess cost funds. The excess cost funds, you'll see in your packet on page, the historical goes back to excess costs. Actual will go back to what we actually got in 2017. That was another $2.1 million. So you have your IDA at 1.3, I'm sorry, page 20, apologize. 1.3 plus the 2 million, 2.1, so now you're up to $3.4 million of special education. And then you would have your depending on where you are in terms of some of the costs, you would have other funding that could come in based on Medicaid, but that's not from this, that's a different program that we could utilize to offset our budget. So for example, Medicaid, you might have another $100,000, we're not talking millions, in that area. So in general, you're talking probably between 3 to 5 million. I don't know if I'm stating that correctly, Mr.
Yeah, that's a pretty good guess, yeah.
And like the STARS program, is that part of that or is that separate?
That's
You know that?
separate. The STARS program, we can claim, it could be part of it. STARS, just for those who don't aren't familiar with that program, we have a K-2, what we would say predominantly autism program, and then a 3-5 program, one at Stevens Elementary School and one at Pond Hill. The students in those programs, there are a tremendous amount of supports provided. Depending on how much we can allocate in terms of a cost per student. So if a student, we take the class, if there's 10 students, a classroom teacher at $75,000, we could say $7,500 is for each of the students. Then we look at the para-educators and we have to divide those across the 10 students. Then we have to look at speech language services. We have to look at OT, PT, social worker, psychologist, BCBA, any support that's provided, we have to divide it up. Now, if it meets that magic threshold of $75,000, then we could actually get money back from the state. Oftentimes, our in-house programs don't meet the threshold, and that's why they're in-house. So your STARS program, there would be some exceptional situations if a student had significant amount of resources on top of the average, but in most instances, our in-house programs do not meet those thresholds.
Okay. And I didn't realize STARS goes to 5. I thought it was just a K-2. I didn't realize it's all the way up. Okay.
And then, depending on the student's needs, we also have Inspire, which moves into the middle school, and then we also have it at the high school level.
Wow, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, this is more editorializing than a question, but there were some comments before about parents, and of course parents need to be involved, but to me, you have to guard against what I would say is the just say no mentality with drugs. And that's sort of, I mean, if you have a child who's nonverbal, no amount of parenting is going to help that child. That child needs help.
Correct.
And so I just think we have to keep that in mind. So, but thank you for everything. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to go back to the busing for a minute.
Sure.
Jason opened the door up and there was some interesting commentary. You explained it very eloquently about, different children, different needs, and okay. I agree with that to a point. And then there's part of that that just gets blown out of the water. Because when I leave my house in the morning, I live on the east side of Wallingford, I can get down Quigley Road and that bus will stop at house after house after house after house. And these are junior high and high school kids. But then I go down South Elm Street, and there's a cluster of kids that come out of the public housing and come out of, was that Elm Gardens, and they come down with the parents, and there'll be 20, 30 kids getting on a bus there, because the bus isn't going through those neighborhoods.
Correct.
Okay. And then I come downtown, and the bus doesn't go through those neighborhoods. And there's kids from kindergarten through high school that come and cluster on the corner of Meadow Street is one of the clusters, and then back in the back neighborhood on Church Street, in Church and Meadow, there's clusters there. So why can they cluster, but the ones in the outer district that the houses are, okay, they're 1 acre lots or half acre lots, can't walk, 50 or 100 feet to cluster?
Again, I don't know the specifics of those neighborhoods, but it would depend on sidewalks, and I'm assuming you're suggesting there are sidewalks.
Yeah, there's
Probably not on Quigley, though.
The what?
Probably on Quigley, there's no sidewalks. I don't know, but I would guess there aren't.
Again, the answer that I know is probably not acceptable is the fact that everything is taken into consideration. We could definitely go back. We reroute every year. That is something that we started back when I first got here. We weren't using technology to do our routes when I first got here. We were using very limited technology. And then we had to interface. We created a system that interfaced it with Power School so that if there were changes, they talked to each other, because that wasn't happening, which was very difficult. So our bus coordinator or our transportation clerk works with the bus company every year to basically do a zero route analysis, kind of like you would do a zero-based budget, and then we build from there. So there's definitely opportunities to look at all of these points.
Yeah, I've just seen it changed over years, because I can remember years ago when my kids on our street, at Dead End Street, they actually walked across. There were no crosswalks. There were 8 kids in the neighborhood at that time, and they walked across. And then, as time went on, we noticed the bus coming down our street and stopping at different houses, so it was done once before, I think it can be done again. And is there anything that, with the busing, is that something that has ever been looked into, to have the parents contribute to busing?
Again, that's a statutory requirement. We can't require a parent to pay for transportation. These are all part of public education. It's part of the benefit of having a child and being in a society that supports public education and public services. I know I haven't reaped those benefits because I don't have a child, but I know that that's part of my responsibility as a taxpayer. So the fact is that we can't charge. We can't, create a menu and say, if you want your... Unfortunately, John, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I don't have the authority.
If we can't do that, then I think we have to make it better somehow. So
I guess the other thing, though, is the balance, and I'm not suggesting that we can't look at this, because I totally agree, is that we also have to look at, and it goes back to, Mr. Zandri's comments, is that you also have to look at the cost-benefit analysis of things. So if we're going to cluster kids and potentially, I know you're not suggesting put them in an unsafe situation, but cluster kids just for clustering kids, and there's really no cost benefit to that, then I have to say, okay, why did we do it? What am I gaining from that? So I think that's always part of our conversation. But I know that we're in the last year of our bus contract with this company. It'll be a conversation that we continue to have, and we'll definitely, I know Dominic, in his own interesting handwriting, has written a lot of notes about this particular topic that I know he'll bring back, and we can
yeah, because it's something, I know Jason's gotten questions, and I'm sure every one of us
I
here
get them all the time.
at one time or another has
Absolutely.
gotten questions of, why does this happen? Why does the bus have to stop at every one of these houses? For 2 reasons. People are why does it happen? The other reason, they're just in a rush.
Yep.
That's the other.
Well, on the other side of it, though, is if you put yourself in the side of the parent who, say for next year, we said everybody's going to be at a group stop and you're going to walk to it, and the parent says, well, what do we gain by having our student have to walk to the bus stop? Did the district gain anything from that?
Well, yeah.
And that's
sure you would.
the other balance.
Sure
What
you-
am I gaining?
Sure you would.
What's the game?
You're not having that bus stop. You're not having that bus. Just the fuel cost alone that you.
But we're not. I guess the thing is, though, if I have to give them a dollars and cents gain on that,
You would
I'm
be
not
able to.
gaining anything.
I think you would be able to.
Well, no, because
We're
we
not
don't
gonna
pay for
eliminate
their
a
fuel.
bus. Yeah, we're not gonna eliminate a bus by doing that, so.
So,
that's
and
where
I'm
the
not saying that I
driving
shouldn't worry about
cost.
the environment and fuel, so I don't want to get anybody mad at me for that.
I wasn't even going there. It was not even going there. But there's got to be a cost savings. There's got to be a cost savings. Somehow, it just didn't.
We're not charged by the stop.
Aren't we charged by the student?
No,
We're charged by the bus.
route, the bus route.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
route,
So it's not by the-
each route is gonna cost us the same amount.
Well,
I
I'm
mean,
going to
they
let it
could get
go.
there
I mean, we're not
quicker.
going to solve this tonight by any means, and I can see we could sit here for another couple hours going over this, but it was just a concern.
We can
Like,
stay until a bus comes to get us tomorrow. So I'm sure one's going to stop here, so.
if we can cluster, yes. Okay. Thank you.
Just don't drive by it, please.
No, drive.
Counselor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that was sort of where I was, because I remember at some point reviewing, for some reason, the bus bid or the contract.
Yep.
And I don't know that it's on them. Their job is to get the children to school. This is the route and, bid it. So, I don't know that there'd be any savings. But I just want to, since we're a little loose tonight, with all due respect, one of my favorite things in Hartford is when the school tours come in. And a few weeks ago, a very large class from Lyman Hall came in, and we had a very, it's not condescending, a very intelligent, should I say that? A very adult conversation about marijuana, tolls, family leave, and minimum wage, prompted by them, not by me. It was awesome. But the alternative school came in afterwards. And we had a very similar conversation that I had to prompt myself. And there was one of the students, and I brought them over to see my Capitol office.
I saw the picture.
Oh, okay, cool. And as we're walking over, I asked one of the students, why was this person in the group? And she explained to me that her parents had gone through a divorce. And she had a lot of problems with that. And I'm not going to get into the problems, but I have a similar history. And it was very, we had a very nice conversation, and she explained how the system, the program, saved her. It was really cool. So that's why they came to my office, because I wanted to spend more time with them and, just learn more about them. So I just, while we talk about problems and things like that, of all the classes that I've had, it gave me some hope. So,
There's a lot of hope in our schools.
well, a lot of money,
I know.
so I'm balancing,
I appreciate that.
but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oops.
Counselor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to jump back on the transportation thing too. And the reason that I'm doing it is because, and I'm not suggesting that you guys are downplaying.
No, I understand.
But I think there's another component to savings, and whether that's fuel, environment, or time, or whatever it is, and maybe it isn't even tangible to our budgets. But one of the things that I see is, and the drivers are dead wrong. They're impatient in the morning, without a doubt. I watch them blow by these school buses, and where I actually do see it, it is personally where I've seen it. I'm not suggesting this is it all the time. It isn't the headspace. It's the fact that they are coming down the road and the opposite direction, and they're playing catch up, and they're getting stopped continually. I mean, it sounds silly,
No,
and I made the example out of Hosper Street because I experienced that, but when a driver's on the other side and they may or may not have left enough time for work, and I'm not making an excuse for them, but when they watch kids come, they're not waiting outside, they're waiting in their porch and they're coming out. That's where they get aggravated, and safety is a concern, and it's a concern when it's on the other side of the street as well, because the student's not coming out where they're supposed to. They're waiting for the bus to roll up, and it's a combination of everybody's responsibility in this scenario, and there's going to be a bigger problem. So I think some of the things that we're saving is risk and safety. And the problem is those buses continually stopping, or they're holding up traffic in the morning, and it gets bad because you're building up lines. I mean, I'm not going to go as far as to say the bus should pull over, signal right lights off, and let some of these cars pass, but something's got to be done. When there are 15 cars lined up down South Main going all the way back to Elm, that's a problem. And it's going to become a safety issue, because what happens too is, I live over there. Someone gets so aggravated, they go up Lincoln Avenue and they blow down Grandview to come out at Cedar in front of that bus. And that neighborhood is full of kids. And it's not just my neighborhood, it happens elsewhere. I watch it happen down on South Cherry Street when they'll go down Clifton to get around the buses. So there's a combination of things. And again, the drivers are wrong. I'm not blaming the buses. But I think whatever we can do to facilitate things that make sense. Quigley Road, I looked it up. There are no sidewalks, at least in the area that I could map out. Other areas, there's plenty of sidewalks. And there might be special cases. And I'm sure, though, where there's a special case, Johnny and Jane's mother wants it too. If you can stop right there, you can stop 5 more houses up too. I didn't want to come into this conversation as passionate as I am now about it, but it does get people upset if it seems unjustified, and sometimes it does. And we have to think not just of the dollars and cents part of it, which is the main reason we're here tonight, but other things that come into it. So I mean, again, I want to look for an overall solution, and if we can tighten up the rules and regulations, who's really justified to have the stop and who isn't, I think it helps out. It helps out with traffic flow. I mean, especially now in the spring with all this construction on top of it, starting before school is all in, the roads can become impacted by that traffic flow, and the buses are a component. If we can try to do more to keep the flow going, I want to see it. I don't want to look at this just from a dollars and cents, although that's the primary reason we're here today. So thank you for that, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for indulging me again.
Understand.
Sure.
Counselor Morgenstein.
Thank you, welcome. So back to our big book on page 65, two-part question. So rentals, there's probably a fairly long list of what that actually is, but is there something in rentals that if we were to be investing, we might own something rather than renting it?
The rentals, again, like you said, cover a variety of things. That we, at this point, that we don't have the ability to own anything, in the sense that we have broached the topic in the past of potential services to rent certain spaces or not rent them.
Are we talking real estate rental? I wasn't sure if this might even be like equipment that we rent. Is this
It's a
purely-
combination. And so that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Sometimes we rent things on both. I'm not just talking about
Yeah,
real
yeah,
estate.
okay.
So some of the rentals, and in the book, I'm just making sure that I have the right page there. We have a whole host of rentals. So it's not just about buildings, it's about athletic rinks. So it's hockey rinks, it's golf courses, it's the rentals that go along with the equipment that we use for special education. So some of that is rented because you wouldn't want to purchase it because as the child gets older, you wouldn't want to, you would grow out of it basically, or you might not need it anymore. And then it's the Board of Education office. So that's the only facility that we rent. And then the rest of them are all of the other services.
So for example, hockey rink, we've probably been doing hockey rink rental for 30 years and we could have built one by now?
Well, it's funny you should say that because I have broached that topic before with members of the community, and I have broached the topic of building a sports arena or utilizing a space to build an indoor sports facility, as some of my board members or previous board members know. I know Mr. Shortell was on the board at the time, and so was Mr. Marone, looking at that and putting in an ice rink. Because yes, the rinks are, between the two rinks, we're spending each year $47,000. We're spending $17,000 for Choate and $30,200 for Northford. They can't use the same rink because obviously practice times would be difficult. So that's why we can't do that. So yes, if you look at 10 years, that's $400,000 over 10 years that you could put towards it, and other facilities.
10 years, yeah.
That's kind of a town question. I mean, that's.
Oh, no,
you
it
guys
is. Oh, it absolutely is.
That's for you guys,
Yeah, yeah.
really.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I'm not
Honestly.
asking, expecting the Board of Ed to pay for it. Yeah.
Oh, no, but yeah, that's
We weren't
a
taking
community.
it that way.
Yeah, no, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I didn't take it that way. But I mean, as a community, if that's
Right.
something the community wants to invest in, that
Right.
would be something that would come
Right,
from
yeah,
you
yeah.
folks.
Yeah, and I guess that brings me a little bit to my next question, which is kind of a general government BOE question, and I asked the same question of the police. I was very happy to hear that we've used capital funding for oil tank removal, and the mayor meets with you and gives capital funding. But evening security, facilities, charges, repair and maintenance, do you believe that with the very aging buildings that we have, with the California-style buildings that we have, heating systems, all of it being very old, maintenance, various costs that are not education costs, I mentioned seeing evening security guards and such, would be reasonable to, at some point, say, this should be being handled rather than by the education people, by the general government side of things. We have an elderly population in this town that does not pay fully into the education budget. A very nice housing complex that, for all good reason, was able to negotiate that they do not pay into our Board of Ed. I really liked your statement. I don't have children, but I pay into a school system. I may not, there's other people that are the other direction that pay very much. Is there, if there were an interest to sit down and parse out things, a willingness on your part to look at that?
We've offered that
We've been offering that for
several
years.
Yeah.
So, but again, it's a delicate balance, as you know. All of these decisions, be it where you use money from one pool to another, it is a delicate balance. So we'll do whatever we are asked to do. We always come to the table, and I have to say our relationship with the mayor and the town hall is fantastic. They'll meet with us on a moment's notice. The mayor has done that for me recently on topics regarding such matters, and we're very collaborative. So whatever was asked of us, we would do so in terms of anything budgetarily or maintenance or any of those things. We'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, because it would seem that you could probably fairly readily come up with a list. These are education things. These are not education things. And where money comes in from tax dollars, we could have more. If this were
We already
structured
have a
differently.
list of that.
Yeah, right, you have that list, I'm sure you do. Very thorough and very appreciated. And then it occurs to me that maybe my question for the cafeteria people might actually be for you guys. I understand that there is outside funding for breakfast programs. It's something that we have not put in place.
We're actually, we were ready to pilot the breakfast program actually at Pond Hill. You might not be aware of this, but our director got an offer to be the head of food services at the University of St. Joseph, which is kind of like going from AA directly to the major leagues. So we're unfortunately losing our director next Friday. We do have an interim director who's in place, so we're looking to, we had to put on hold the implementation just because we want to make sure it was successful, but we would look to launch the pilot of the breakfast program at least at one, if not two of our elementary schools come the fall. We do have the breakfast program at our high school. I don't know if you're aware of
No,
that.
I didn't know that.
We've had that for years now. It gets overlooked, and I have to say our new director, who we're going to sorely miss because he's increased our sales by 10%, the high school program has increased significantly, the breakfast program.
There's a big need. Yeah.
There's a definite need.
Yeah.
So we are moving in that direction. We're looking at a grab and go situation so that we're not looking at prepared meals because
Okay.
that's a lot to ask.
Yeah.
We want things that are self-contained in a bag that could go into the garbage and then the custodian can just come by and pick it up, so we have reduced the spills, reduce, all those things that little people do. So we're trying to reduce that so we don't have additional costs and expenditures. So we are looking to move forward with a pilot on that.
Good. Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that was the last of the question. Oh,
Oh,
really?
He almost got.
I thought we went by your stop.
Oh.
Oh, you will, believe me, you will. I just want to go back to where I started, just for a minute. I'm not going to belabor the point, but, I just want to be clear. I am in favor of special ed. I understand it. And Counselor Fishbein brought up a good point. His niece utilized the program, got benefit from the program. I understand that. I understand the need of it. My family, my friends have utilized the program. Where my frustration comes in is because it gets blended with special needs and discipline. And I say that because you and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about two students. And these two students were junior high school students that were so bad that they couldn't be tutored at the library. The library refused to have them in the building. So the tutor met with one of the young gentlemen. The other one refused to come in. And it happened right next door to my store at the Hubcap. And it was the most atrocious thing I've ever seen happen. The disrespect for that teacher, for that tutor, and the disrespect that these children showed. And these were, they're getting special help because we have to. It's mandated. I understand that. But one of the children, and I use the term loosely child, I know the parents from the downtown area. And there's no discipline whatsoever from the parent. Nothing. So it comes back on the school system. And when it comes to the school system, it's the parent saying, you fix it. You fix it. We're not going to. We're just not going to. Whether they don't want to or they don't have the knowledge to do it. But when it comes back on the school system, situations like that come back to our budget because somebody has to pay for this. So, you know, that's my frustration, is when we have situations like that. And this is not an isolated situation. I
just want to interject because I want to make sure that whomever's watching this understands, first of all, because you put out some statements that are potentially very charged.
Okay.
Number one, in our conversation, we never exchanged any names.
Absolutely not.
Nothing. So I want to make that very clear.
Absolutely not.
Because I have strict guidelines that I have to follow under the law.
Nor did I.
Known as FERPA. And
Nor
you
did
never
I.
did either. But I just need to put that out there.
Absolutely.
You shared generalities.
Yes.
There were no specifics. There were no comments made. But I just need to state that because, again, you're walking a fine line. I appreciate your concern.
Thank you for that clarification.
I appreciate your sentiment. However, again, as an educator, and I guess it's a little bit different. As an educator, we know that everyone that comes into our buildings, they're not going to be all the same mindset. They're not going to have all the same resources at home. That's why we do what we do. If we wanted to do something differently and we wanted everything to be perfect, we wouldn't be educators. So I think that that's a challenge. I understand your view that you're looking at this through, and I appreciate it through the financial lens. The reality is that we have to balance that, as you know. And I think our educators do an exceptional job doing that, and I know you're not suggesting they don't.
Absolutely not. I give them for a lot of credit, but I could never do their job.
Absolutely. So I think
I would
though,
last 5 minutes.
but also I think we have to be very cautious, and I know you personally. I mean, you're a very sincere individual. We just have to be very cautious because every situation with a child, it's not as easy as A plus B equals C. There's always something in there that is a variable that we don't know even exists. And those variables exist not just nowadays. When I was growing up, we all had friends that maybe had variables that we couldn't control.
They were always there, but it was dealt with differently.
Well, I think it is and it isn't. So I just want to I don't want to prolong the conversation.
Right.
I just want to make sure that it was very clear that if anybody heard that, they didn't think Dr. Menzo was speaking about another student with a townsperson inappropriately. So I just wanted to clarify that because that was not the case. And I just want to make sure that that got stated because that is not the way that we do business at the school district.
No, I understand. And I'm sure everybody out there understands that.
No, I know, but I just...
Thank you for the clarification. But again, I just wanted to clarify my position on special ed, that, you know, I'm not against it.
No, I understand.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think we're clear.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to the cafeteria.
I think, were there any questions besides Joe saying he loves institutional food?
Oh, gosh.
Your microphone's off. Deliberately?
That's probably a good thing.
Are there any cafeteria questions besides
I
Ms.
thought we
Morgenstein's?
had,
I thought Councilor Fishbein did.
okay, Counselor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, do you have any comments before I start with this budget? Excuses, explanations? I mean, I got a lot of questions. I mean, I got a lot of blue on this page. So, we're running a loss. $34,000 loss. And what do we attribute that to?
I'm sorry, what loss are you,
Yeah.
Bottom line shows a loss of $34,908.
okay, for last year?
It was last
Correct,
year.
last year.
17, 18.
That was
So-
last year.
We're not running a loss this year, we're break
Yeah.
even.
Well,
Or
yeah, so we lost $34,000 last year,
Yep.
and the major, I would say the major contributor to that was our participation of lunch sales, okay?
Yeah,
Went
just so
down.
that the first time I see numbers from last year is when I get this book.
Okay, that's fair.
So-
Yeah. What I would also say is the prior year, there was a $18,000 profit, but the Board of Ed transferred 30,000, 39,000.
Yeah, there wasn't a profit.
So, yeah, that's why I said profit.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, so,
That's money
it's
that
not
could have gone
app-
for education.
It's not apples and
Correct.
oranges when you look at those two, the actual
So.
between 2 years, okay?
The one full year that I have in my book is the year ending June 30th, 2018.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, all right, I'm sorry,
So
I thought you had
that's,
the other one.
that's what I'm looking.
All right, fair enough.
You've got, in your roll-up, you should have some historical data.
Which would have been what we would have addressed last year.
Also, you have 16 and 17.
And we would have addressed that the
Okay,
year
sure.
before.
Page 44
Right, but
and
just say page
45.
Yeah.
34.
All right.
So I'm dealing with the new numbers because I think this is, well, this is sort of, because when I first got on the council, we had a significant amount of money in reserves. We were taking 100,000, 125,000 and supplementing this budget, which is supposed to be an enterprise fund, to prop it up, keep it whole. And I said the money would go away, and I was right, and I think you guys agreed.
I just want to, can I
Yep.
just clarify, this is not an enterprise, it's not an enterprise fund, it's a special revenue fund, and probably Mr. Bose, he's gone, but we could maybe give you a better accounting explanation between the two, but this is not a true enterprise fund like the utilities in town.
Yes, understood, but the money is kept separate in a part. You
Correct,
are
correct.
authorized to supplement the budget, as when, we had an enterprise fund here for the ambulance, we were allowed to take money from a different account and supplement at a certain rate at, I think it was no more than 10%. So enterprise funds come in different colors, and maybe this is not, well, it's certainly not a sustaining enterprise fund.
It's almost more like a special, you probably have a Parks and Rec special revenue fund where it's a little bit of a hybrid, you try to self-sustain on the programs you're running there.
Sure.
In my mind anyway, it's a little more like that, but when you say enterprise fund, I start thinking about depreciation, all the things that your utilities do.
Okay, so let's go to fundamentals of an enterprise fund, is to, through the product sold, created then sold, a true enterprise fund, it's the revenues gained from sale of the product come back in to buy more raw products.
Sure, and
personnel.
infrastructure,
Yeah, the whole thing is
Yeah,
self-containing, right?
correct.
So is that the intent of the Board of Education here? Is to work towards that? I mean, what's the goal?
The intent is for this fund to break even and not lose money.
Yeah.
In an operating, I don't think we expect this fund to be able to, be like a restaurant and put a new building in. We don't expect to charge rent for each cafeteria in our buildings, but I think, the operating costs, to recoup the operating costs through the sales.
Okay, so a successful, a C-graded fiscal year there would be a zero on the net income or loss.
Zero, if they made a little money, that would.
They made a little money,
Yeah, but I don't think we're expecting this fund to make $100,000 a year.
Yeah, but if you made a little money, it'd be a C+. If you made a little bit
fair.
more money, it's a B, right?
Fair enough. Yeah.
But the goal, the satisfactory fiscal year is a zero.
Zero or better, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
But last year was a minus $34,000. So it wasn't we didn't meet our goal.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. So what do you attribute that less than a C year to?
Well, I think we've had, we've probably had a lot of turmoil in that fund for the last couple of years. We had a retirement, we had, an interim, then we brought in another person. I think there was, part of it was a transition, quite frankly.
Okay, so are there particular lines here, because I've blued out, highlighted some lines. Are those lines reflected somewhere?
Well, no,
here?
but I think those impacted sales. I mean, what caused the deficit is the sales were down, okay? The sales were decreasing, and that, and
Well,
that
I
hit
mean,
the
just
revenue.
Craig, to just a very simple one, if you go to the next page, obviously our previous history has been $1,400 for unemployment. Last year it was $16,400.
Agreed. That's
So
one
right
of the
there,
lines.
that is a clear indicator.
Absolutely. So that's
I'll
one of the
just-
lines that I highlighted.
Yeah.
So
That is definitely
why was that
Because we had a
800% increase?
previous interim director who was on board. We did not rehire. We went out to bid. Went out as a process. He was not awarded the job. He filed for unemployment, and we are required to pay for that unemployment.
And the way we pay for it differently than a business is we actually pay when we're assessed. So most businesses pay, it's a percentage of payroll. We don't pay a percentage of our payroll into the unemployment fund. When somebody files, we're responsible for some or all of the claim.
So is that like a form of self-insurance?
Kind of, almost, yeah, almost. It's not, yeah, most businesses, payroll is the unemployment is a percentage of their payroll. That's not our case.
So somebody.
So if somebody doesn't, if nobody files for unemployment for the whole year, that number will be 0.
Okay.
The other number that you probably highlighted was the full-time employees. As you recall in the past, and I think we've had these conversations for many years, when our predecessor in food services was here, there was never a full staff. And that was always a problem. It was a risk that we ran with the union. It was risk that we ran with the labor board because we were paying a lot of substitutes. And, were we doing our due diligence to fill those positions? So with our new director, we wanted to get out of that. And so we hired all the full-time employees that we needed rather than doing a hybrid of substitutes. So that's why there was an increased cost there, because we were fully staffed. We were fully staffed with full-time employees. In the past, we were fully staffed, but it wasn't necessarily with full-time employees. It was with part-time people making less wage without benefits.
So now I have to question the business decision to do that, because we have downtrending sales and yet
But
we
the problem,
make the
it's not a business
to
decision,
increase-
it's a legal decision.
Okay.
Because the fact is, when you have a union and you're circumventing, basically, the potential being accused of circumventing hiring full-time employees that are union employees, and you're circumventing that by hiring part-time employees that aren't union employees, that are substitutes, you potentially leave yourself open for liability. And that was a concern because that had gone on and this is something that we kept bringing, to the attention of our directors, that we needed to be cautious with that, because the fact is that we don't want to open ourselves into a situation where the labor union feels that we're trying to save money on the backs of not doing our due diligence of actually fully employing the necessary resources that we needed at that time. So I understand fiscally, absolutely, we're on the same page, that if you want to save money, then let's do that. Let's just hire a group of part-time people that we don't have any responsibility to. But in reality, if you have a contract with a union and you say there's this many members that should be in it, or there's this many positions, you can only go so long before you run the risk of having an unfair labor practice.
But while the full-time employee line increased based upon the
Correct.
appropriation, the part-time line decreased.
Because the fact was that, again, that's what I'm saying.
I understand, but
So-
I'm talking about numbers. You're talking about bodies.
No, I'm
So-
talking about numbers too, because with those numbers, if they go from one category to another, so if we had 2 part-time people doing a full-time position when it should have been a full-time position to begin with, we're not only losing bodies in the part-time position, but we're also losing dollars, because now the money goes up to the line above it.
I
It's now the
understand.
full-time.
But if you lose $25,000, if you increase spending on the by $25,000 on the full-time employee line,
Correct.
and then you decrease spending by $25,000 on the part-time employee line, the net effect is zero.
Zero, exactly.
So there is no
But the only
portion of that that's
but the
attributable
only
to your
problem
loss of
is
$34,000.
you have the increase in benefits, so that was $3,000, and then you also have the increase in pension contribution.
Okay, so maybe
Another
those
5,000.
lines.
Yeah, no, that's what,
so-
I didn't get there yet. I
Okay.
was getting there.
So, the health benefits. So there's actually, what I'm looking at is a decrease in health benefits by $2,000. What was appropriated was $99,357, and what was the actual was $97,248, so that's a decrease of $2,000.
Correct.
Okay,
But
so,
but it's an increase
increased
over the actual prior year. I mean, it went up
over the
about
prior year.
$3,000.
hold on, wait a second, I got two people talking.
It was an increase over the prior year. That was the prior year was 94,000.
Hold on, wait, okay, so. Okay, I'm looking at the 18-19 appropriation, so I see what you're saying. You're saying that that essentially starts 7/1/18, and I'm looking at the column that ends 6/30/18. Got it. Okay,
Sorry.
that's fine. Thank you. Any other lines that you would attribute this $34,000 to? Not trying to trick you.
No.
I don't have the answer right now.
No, I think that that was the biggest circumstance, and then the fact that the revenues were lower because we did see a decrease in the purchases of meals.
Revenues are almost 100 grand lower. 985 down to 883, actually. So the revenues really is really where, where we lost we lost it.
Okay, but yet I heard that there was an increase.
For
This year. So we're talking about current
Okay,
year.
that's
not
fine.
the one that closed.
Okay.
Yeah, not the.
So,
yeah.
so that's all in this year, that increase, which we've
Correct.
only got, we've got no numbers in those columns, which was another question. Why do I have
Which,
Can I just see?
yeah, which one are you looking at?
page 80, I'm looking at my book that the mayor gave us, page 87,
We don't,
has a 0. That's what I'm supposed to rely upon.
we are working off of page 44 and the last page of the book.
why I keep saying 16, 17.
Yeah, but see, this.
Yeah, I'm with you now. I now understand why.
Okay, so, and I just, because we're sort of on the mic, but I just want to ask you, so you can have this back? Because I've got mine right here. Yeah. So, just wanted to ask you, because if we're not on the mic, we can't follow along. In that green book, where does it show me the actual expended as of January 31st, 2019 for the cafeteria?
January 31st, 2019, it wouldn't.
Okay.
That's in our monthly reports. We have those at every month. We do monthly reports.
I
on
will-
that.
I've been doing this 10 years. And almost exactly 10 years.
That's never been in this book.
Okay. Well,
Why specific January 31st, Craig?
that's what they pick. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
7 month. It's usually the mayor is working on the budget February. They want to know where the books close out at the end of January. In fact, they used to
Understandable.
do 12/30 of the prior year. We asked them for
Another month.
best numbers they could get us, which they usually get us. So then I can compare. I can say, oh, okay, sales are up, you're projected, this is how much you got left of the year. So I don't ever recall that column being empty, but I don't know why it is. So that's a mayor issue. The banquets and other, what is that?
So, the reason that, did you notice there's a big decrease projected for next year?
Yes.
Because we had a program called
work camp?
Work Camps, where a group of students came in to Wallingford. They stayed at
Oh,
one of the high
yeah.
schools and they
Yes.
worked
Yeah.
on the houses. So that was I don't know if it was a one-time, but they're not going to be back next year.
Yeah,
So
we're
the
actually-
banquets are, the banquet number was, they brought in, that was about $23,000 of revenue this current year. That's why we're projecting it so much lower next year, because that's
Okay.
not happening.
So the numbers that I'm looking at, though, would appear to show that you did not project that revenue when you came before the council last year.
No, we
Because we
didn't,
didn't know what was going to happen.
we didn't know what was
Exactly.
gonna happen,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm looking at projections, okay?
Okay.
So last year, when you were here with the cafeteria budget, you requested approval for 16,224. For some reason, that got rounded down to 16,000. That was what is approved. And this year, you're looking for the 16,224 again. And I'm just trying to figure out, because the year before you had 14, which is, close. But what is that, banquets and other?
What that would be is catering events that are done and paid for by for example, a basketball team, they'll do a senior night and the parents will ask our catering service in the school to offer the pasta dinner. It might be an ice cream social. It might that a school would, the PTO would ask us to do. It's field days at the elementary schools.
So is that a profitable venture for the?
Yes, and we continue to try to grow that, absolutely.
Because that isn't broken out. I can't tell, with other stuff I can say, I can compare expenses, personnel. I can't tell. I'm gonna take your
We don't break out the cost of goods sold for catering versus everyday lunches.
Well, it's,
Yeah.
I look at this sort of like a business.
Yeah, no, I hear you,
There's
yeah.
There's no statute that mandates this, so, looking at page 88, I just want to, well, once again, I still don't have the 19, but kitchen maintenance is that an infrastructure expenditure or is that a personnel expenditure?
It's equipment, it fixing the fridge or the stove, oven.
So it's not replacement?
No, typically, something like that might be approved either, from the Board of Ed is, out of 1%, or maybe, I think CRA money in the past has been allocated towards equipment,
The
big
combi ovens and
equipment.
such, yeah.
So none of this stuff is under like maintenance contracts or anything like that?
Oh no, we do have the maintenance contracts. This is that if something is outlasted the maintenance contract and is still working, that we have to make sure that we budgeted for those expenditures.
Okay, so I'm just comparing what you asked for, what was approved last year, and the actual for the end of the year, June 18. So if we just, we'll just compare this budget, which, looking at kitchen maintenance line, you asked the mayor for $22,000, but last year, through a full year, you used less than half of that, so.
Correct. And the reason why is that we've added more maintenance contracts to newer equipment. So, because remember, as Dominic just said, we've recently, over the last 3 years, we've received, very gratefully from the mayor, money through CRA to put in combi ovens, combination ovens, where we do more of the cooking right at the elementary schools, which is more efficient and better tasting. So now that we want to make sure that once the regular maintenance agreement is up, that we continue those maintenance agreements. So we had an influx at, I think, all 8 elementary schools received at least one combi oven. And that was a matter of 3 years ago, so most often they have a 1 to 2 to 3 year initial agreement. And so we picked up the additional agreements so we have coverage going forward. So that's why you see that bump up, to cover our assets that we purchased.
Okay, I'm just looking at that goal of 0
We look at it every month.
And I'm hearing, you know, it's more convenient, it tastes better. I understand that aspect.
Well, because you don't sell it if it
Yeah.
doesn't.
it promotes
I know, but let's look at the next line, kitchen supplies. So last year, well, this year, you're asking for 43,546. Last year, you only expended 10,342. So somehow that number's gotten tripled, and it's actually in excess of your loss, your projected loss for this year.
But in the year prior to that, we expended 44,500. So that's a number that probably, it was, for whatever reason, it was, the last year was actually the outlier.
Well, I think that what happened was, is that the previous person in the position had pre-purchased materials that were able to be used in that year. And then unfortunately, when you don't create a consistent purchasing process, you end up getting yourself into those hills and valleys. So what we need to do is create a consistent purchasing process. I think over time, to your point, that number should decrease, because if we do create that consistent purchasing process, I think we're not going to necessarily go down to a low of $10,342, but we're not going to necessarily stay at a high of 42,000. We're probably going to find a spot between 25,000 and 30,000, because that'll maintain our product. But if you have a warehouse, and this is what happens, and we had this with remember the cheese, and you know, when you have a lot of something and somebody gets stockpiling, and then a new person comes in and says, wait a minute, if we don't use those paper plates, if we don't use those napkins, if we don't use those things, they're only going to go, we're going to throw them out. That's what happened at that period. That's why we didn't need to purchase them, because we didn't have the need for those product. Now as we balance it.
So what controls has the Board of Education put into place to make sure this doesn't happen in the future?
Well, that's where we put in all the controls last year. The packet that the Board of Education gets every month is about 6 different documents. And that's done, it goes through the supplies, it goes through all the different areas, free reduced lunch, it goes through the percentages. So we've put in a lot of internal controls under the direction and coordination of Dominic to make sure that we have those in place. So our inventory controls, you know, not just food, but also your dry product, which that's referring to the paper goods. So we have put those in place, because you don't want that. You know, you can't run a healthy business if you're volatile. You don't, not that you want to flatline, but in some areas you do want to flatline. You want to be able to have a predictable expenditures.
We also, we have a monthly comparison that compares each month, you know, to the prior year's month, because the months, you know, September versus December are very different. So we compare September of current year versus September of prior year, because they tend to have the same number of serving days and things like that. So we you know, we look at it on a monthly basis and a year-to-date basis.
One of the challenges that I think we're experiencing right now is, and these are important topics, but is the food costs. Food costs have really become a challenge this year. And when you look at it, I think the ratio, if I recall from past experience, you want to try to have your food costs be the 30 to 40%. And our food costs have gone up. And part of it is because just food has gone up in price. But also, if you try to create a meal that's more, you know, desirable on the part of the students, then we're in a better condition. And so I think that when we look at it, and we talk about this every month, is the food cost, trying to bring the food costs down, but not at the same time reduce the growth that we're seeing in our sales. And that's the challenge of any restaurant.
And one of the things that we've wrestled over is the food price.
Correct.
Where are we in the dirt?
We're solidly near the top of the DIRG in terms of our food costs. We've been increasing it. We did another price increase, so we've been doing increases. We had a period of time, and you know, because I inherited that, where we didn't do any increases. We didn't need to, because we were selling fried dough every day. So we were able to do that and make that happen. But then we went a steady climb. So there's that price, there's an equalizer that we have to use from the federal government to make sure we're right where we need to be with that.
Okay, so one more line,
Sure.
because I would hope that your projections are accurate with regard to those other 2 lines we were just talking about. It's the one that's titled miscellaneous. So, last year, you asked for $10,963, and that's what you were given. And you spent $38,243. What do we attribute that quadrupling to the budgeted, well, I don't have the, you're asking for $10,963, but at the end of last year, you had expended $40,000. So what do you attribute that quadrupling to?
I would, to be quite frank, I believe some of certain items were classified as supplies one year and miscellaneous the other year. So, we're trying to get a consistency is how we record things. I think that's a piece of it. And, I think the other thing is, again, we had, over the last 3 years, we had 3 different directors running the P&L here. So we're trying to get it all standardized and consistent because it makes the analysis obviously a lot better.
So if we were to run this like a business, we would have some sort of a POS system or some sort of scanning system.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how could we possibly be miscategorizing kitchen supplies as miscellaneous one year or one director to another director? How does that happen? If that's what you, I heard you correctly?
Yeah, well, first of all, the POS is really on the sales side, so it's not tracking the expenditures. Okay, so the POS is gonna.
So there's no inventory controls?
No, I didn't say that. I said the POS is tracking the sales. And,
Sure.
So, if you buy a reimbursable lunch versus what we call the a la carte.
It's the outflow.
Yeah. The expenditures, we get a lot of invoices and they get coded. And I would, my analysis would be that probably some of them were coded as miscellaneous versus a kitchen supply.
So when the styrofoam, I've run warehouses. When a styrofoam container comes into a facility, do we log it into the system in some way, shape, or form so that we know that whoever's running all of these food services and all of these facilities, whoever's in charge of this, can tell, sitting at their desk, their one station, what they have on hand to service all of these food places?
Yes, there's different inventory controls, and a lot of this stuff is stored. We have a warehouse that has refrigeration and other storage, and so that there is, so that when somebody at one of the schools says, "Hey, I need 500 trays," one of the drivers knows, well, I've got trays up here, or we've got to order them from the vendor. I've got we've got supplies at the warehouse, or we don't, and if we do not have them, then we would have to bring them in.
And is there a list somewhere based upon projected sales as to the amount of inventory that's needed to run this facility over a certain period of time? So that we know when those styrofoam containers get down to 20, because we had 100 last week, that we've got to replenish that, and we have
Yes.
to keep it at a certain level.
Yes, I mean, yes, it's not highly, super automated where we're barcoding the things as we grab them and we get below a certain level and it automatically orders stuff. But basically the different.
Well, that's the way it should work, actually.
Oh, I agree, but we don't have that infrastructure in place. So we have managers that know what they need for their school. They order it. It goes up through the manager's food service director and also through the drivers. And there's inventories that are done monthly on what's left, whether it be food or supplies.
Okay, I'm going to continue to watch. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, can I
Absolutely.
give you just a summary because where we are right now, last year when we came before you, we had a $52,000 deficit, okay? And we made up about 14 grand through the end of the year. We ended up with a 38,000 roughly deficit, all right? Currently, we're at a $27,000 deficit. So we're about half, and you end up we always start in the hole because we start in July and August. We've got some staff we're paying, we've got no sales, and then we got to start up for the year, and then some of our reimbursements through the state come in later in the year. So we're right now, as of the end of last month, because obviously we haven't closed this month out, we were at a $27,000 deficit. If we can make up obviously 15,000 each month, we could get our C plus, if you will. Which the big driver this year is our sales, our reimbursable lunch sales are up quite a bit, probably 10%. And our a la carte sales are up maybe 5 to 6%. So, our revenues are up, and obviously some of our costs are, because if you're selling more meals, you're buying more food.
But in my experience, your sales will trend down from this point forward. Children tend to buy less lunches in the springtime. Wintertime, it's cold. From what I've heard.
I mean, every month we look at each month individually and collectively, and we look at it and say, all right, September last year we had 20 sales days. September this year had 21 sales days. We sold 25,000 meals. We break it out. We've been trending up every month this year. And last year, I think May might have been our strongest month, because one, you got a lot of sales days, because
the longest.
if we don't have what did we have last year? A microburst. You get a lot of sales days. Plus, I believe we're going to get there's also some state revenue that should come next month. So it's not just the sales themselves, but there's also state reimbursement that we would expect to get in May.
I just want to say that from my perspective, I'm very concerned about this expanding to breakfast.
We're not doing it unless we make money.
Yeah, I mean,
Or at least break even. I should say break even. That's the board's premise.
I've been wrestling over this for 10 years.
It's very difficult because the breakfast program, to your point, Craig, and I'm right on the same page with you, because the previous governor wrote me a scathing letter saying I was a horrible superintendent because I wasn't feeding our students breakfast. He said that they had a way to solve our problem, and that he was going to send somebody from his office to solve my problem, and I can make it a feasible program. He came out to the district, gave them all the data, told them that make your magic. Tell me that this is going to work, feasibly going to work, and let us break even. Not even make profit, just break even, not lose money. They came back, they called 2 weeks later, sorry, we can't make this work. So I think that's the balance. That's what we've been looking at it, and with Dominic's support and with David, who is leaving us support, they went and visited a variety of programs. So we're trying to, but we're not moving forward. That's why we said pilot, because the high school program gets a little subsidy from the state, a very small subsidy, but at least it's a feasible program, and actually we do profit on that program.
When do you ever see a government program go away? No pilot program.
Well, no,
Hardly ever.
No, it's a pilot for us.
I understand.
We control it.
I understand. Can you possibly tomorrow say, we're not doing breakfast anymore in any of our schools? It's infeasible.
Well, I think that's our philosophy, and again, this is for the board's decision, has been, and we've stated this all along, that we have to have a feasible program. We can't, with a program like this, we're fortunate that we still have an in-house program with our own staff, supporting our parents and our grandparents and aunts and uncles, whoever work in our school system. We're still very fortunate because we're one of the few. We're becoming one of the few. But we can't have that circumstance create a situation where it creates less of an opportunity for success. So we're on the same page with you on that. That's for certain. But I think we've drilled down to the numbers, so we know exactly how many meals we need to serve for breakfast at each school to break even. It's very nominal, actually, because of the way that the program has been set up, because of the research that's been done. So we don't need to serve, to be honest, I don't even think we need to serve 30 meals at a school. It's very, very nominal.
But and I don't want to belabor this, but I'm a big fan of cost accounting. And, when it's the entire system that has to pay for itself. So when you say, you've got employees here and there, and I need to sell this many breakfasts in that particular school, there are so many components that go into this. I mean, nobody wants to hear me tonight go into cost accounting in this analysis, but anyway, I thank you. So.
I do want to make one point though, because I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that the previous directors that we've been fortunate to work with did not do what they were supposed to do. Everybody has been a contributor to us moving forward as a district in their roles. And so we've been fortunate to have people who have been committed to the role that they've had in our district with food services. It's a challenging department, as you've said.
Thank you.
Councilor Letourneau.
In years past, we've talked about the quality of the food, which has a big, whether you're going to sell it or not, that's a big determining factor. And a lot of that came down between state and federal mandates to make things better, make things healthier, and the healthier it got, the worse, it just got worse tasting. Where are we with that? Is the mandates kind of evened out, or has it gotten better?
They're beginning to ease. There is a new grain waiver that we have taken advantage of, so you don't have to have whole grain. For example, pasta, you don't have to have as many whole grain opportunities for students. There is actually now, there's the whole idea that you don't even need to submit that waiver, so that's afforded to districts, so we have taken advantage of those things. I think that a lot of it, beyond the grain waiver, beyond that, it's the portion size in many instances that's very difficult, especially for our high school students. The one meal doesn't cut it anymore. I remember the year that we had to go from, and I remember Chet Miller, he was awesome because the sub sandwich was this big, and we went from 5 meatballs down to 2.5 meatballs for a football player at the high school. And they're going to buy their one lunch, but then the second lunch is considered a la carte, so the price goes up. And so that was difficult. I think we've kind of turned the corner on that a little bit. It's never going to be easy, no matter how hard we try. It's never going to be easy because there are so many guidelines. And I was just talking to someone yesterday, and I think that going back to when I was growing up, buying school lunch, and my grandmother worked in the West Haven High School cafeteria. It was a treat to buy lunch at school because it was things, to be honest, at that time that my mom would never give us at home, like fried chicken, or anything like that. We were eating fresh vegetables, pasta, of course, antipasto, things like that. Now it's almost the opposite, where it's almost, in some instances, kids don't want to eat lunch at school. They rather eat the food that they're having at home. So it's kind of flipped, and I think that we have to keep contextualizing, and I know we've had this conversation before, that the lunch that I understand that they're trying this, the government is trying to offer students a healthy opportunity, but the bulk of their time that they eat the rest of their meals is at home. And if that doesn't change, what little we can do during the school day is not going to make a habit. It's not habit building. A habit is built over time, doing something repetitively.
You're 100% correct.
And we're not going to be able to build a habit.
Over the years, we've talked about it. If the parents pick them up, or after school, high school kids, they run to McDonald's. It's
Well, and it doesn't even have to be McDonald's. It could be Subway, which is not horrible.
Yeah.
But it's just the size of the sub they're eating versus
That's
the
right.
size of the sub that they were given at school. So.
Okay, I was just curious if it had gotten better or worse.
We've gotten better.
Definitely better.
Good. Maybe we'll see the numbers go up, because I can remember the debate about the whole wheat pizza. I remember
Yes.
there was a group of kids out here,
Yes.
high school kids, and they weren't happy with it.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But the other thing we've done well is also capturing the free and reduced lunch folks, which we've made it easier for families to apply, and we've offered a multitude of ways for parents to access that information and determine if they are eligible for free and reduced lunches. And that population has grown for us, and we've done a better job at capturing them. So that's a revenue source for us. What the federal government's willing to pay us is greater than what a regular à la carte lunch would cost for a regular student. So that's a component too to consider.
So the government will subsidize, offset?
If it's a free and reduced lunch
Correct.
meal,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So I hate to say it, but that's a revenue generator for us. But more importantly, that's nice, but more importantly, we want to make sure we are servicing that population adequately and know that they can take advantage of the idea of a free or reduced lunch. And we've done a way better job at allowing our families discreetly or at their convenience or however you want to describe it, access that information and apply for it and then gain it. And it's more seamless and transparent for everybody. So that's an important factor.
That's good. That's good. Thank you.
I hope you figured out that if after a counselor says he or she is done, you
They're
add
never done.
information, you're going to get more questions.
That's okay.
Counselor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A great deal of my questions were answered through Counselor Fishbein, so I thank him for asking. A couple more did come up, though, from the conversation. So there was one point in the conversation where you were talking about point of sale tracking, point of sale systems and tracking. How accurate is that?
I guess I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, because I actually have a couple of concerns about that because of a personal experience with my own kids. By the way, your a la carte sales being up 5% are going to come down now because I caught my son eating 2 lunches. So, but that's what he was doing. He was buying a hot lunch and he was buying a la carte because he was still hungry.
And we're getting the 2 count there.
And actually, that's where a lot of this came from. Believe it or not, because I was concerned he was being charged twice when he wasn't, and of course he didn't want to admit that he was eating twice. So this discussion got really candid between him because I had Mr. Meshner on the phone at the time I was asking him. So the reason for my question is because of an item that was coming up that he was buying every single day. And it was coming up as fruitables, and I kept asking my son, I go, what is that? It's 85 cents, and I wanted to know what it was because I had told him in the past he was buying these little 4-ounce fruit drinks that were 75 cents, and it was completely ridiculous to purchase those. So he kept insisting that he wasn't buying those, but he wasn't telling me what they were. And they were Rice Krispie treats. So what I don't understand is why don't we have an accurate accounting of what's being sold?
I think, we certainly, it's accurate as far as the items sold and the dollars collected. Maybe the descriptions need to be tweaked a little bit.
A fruitable and a Rice Krispie treat is an entirely different product. My concern is a couple of different concerns. I mean, we're talking about when the big push came down, eat healthier and all this, and the lunches were now going to taste subpar because we were going to have them be healthier grains and all this stuff. Nobody was stopping my son from buying 2 Rice Krispie treats every single day. So on the one hand, we talk about the fact that we want to have healthier choices for meals, and then we're not stopping them from making bad decisions. And in one thing, that's my side that I have to deal with. I have to talk to my son about not doing that. But I guess my part of it is we're not even, if I thought maybe for a second that a fruitable was a healthy thing, I might not even say, well, whatever this fruitable is, maybe there's some real fruit in it and he's eating, but it wasn't. It was a Rice Krispie treat. How can I see that when the system is ringing up wrong? So that kind of leads my question of we need to get that system accurately ringing up what's actually being sold, because from an accounting perspective, that's off then. So
well, it is if, again, what's being shared with you is saying one thing, but and I'm not saying this is correct or the right thing to do, but if the person who's coordinating the inventory knows that unfortunately Fruitable stands for Rice Krispie, then they have that work. And I'm not saying that that's a good answer, but I don't think the accounting in that regard is off. Also, I do want to make sure, and I know you already know this, but for people listening to this, those aren't your normal Rice Krispie squares. They all have to be on the healthy certified list for snacks. by the state of Connecticut. So they're not ones that you could go buy at BJ's or at Stop and Shop.
Well, that may not necessarily be true either, because I have the snack that's displaying is Fruitables is not the item, but it's a Rice Krispie treat with the same price. Now this is the 85-cent price that I'm seeing. They also have a bite-size item, which is 25 cents. I think that might be what you're referring to.
They should be, and I can be wrong, and we could check into this. They should all have to be on the healthy food certificate.
All right. I mean that's again, and I only bring this up not because I want the school or the cafeteria to start saying, listen, you can only have one. Again, I'm as a parent, I'm going to own what my kid did. But the problem was my ability to even do that without having to make a phone call, because the inventory that was being read through the Meal Plus plan wasn't accurate. And it should have been, because then I could have turned around to him, you're sure you're not buying Rice Krispie treats? And he would have said, oh yeah, I was kind of buying them. And then I could have avoided a good portion of this conversation. And they were very good about following up with me. I sent them the whole list of stuff, they went through it. But my concern is, I'm the type of parent that's going to go the extra mile to try to figure something out. A lot of parents don't have the time. And to me, these things should be coming up, the way they're being rung up, because a lot of questions came up because I couldn't identify with
I think we understand the fact is that whatever's being served needs to be accurately depicted on the programs that parents could find that out. So the charge of our food service director, who will be starting or came in today, will make sure that there is that matching up, because I totally agree with you. I get the point. I totally accept what you're saying too, and you need to have a thoughtful conversation with your child. And if you don't have accurate data, how could you do that?
No, and I did, and
it's hard.
But I mean the other side of that too is, and I have to agree with Councilor Turno. I mean, my kids, they like to buy the hot lunch, and we afford them the ability to do it, and we do it sort of like a treat. Sometimes when it's a rush day, just go get the lunch, but. And they have complained less about the way it tastes, so I know that it's getting better. Of course, like I said, the middle one, he'll eat anything, clearly. But what I do want to ask is similar to Councilor Fishbein's question, which is how many, again, I don't like to see the negative number either, and I don't think anybody wants to see a loss line. But how many lunches do we sell during the course of a school year, just on average? If you had to say within a couple of hundred, or within 1,000. I mean, what's the number over the school year?
I gotta look something up, because I'm gonna say we're gonna maybe to 240,000.
240,000. Okay, so
Ballpark in that.
That's all I needed. So, I guess where I'm going with this is 10 cents would move this $34,000 loss to a $10,000. Why can't we go up 15 more cents on the lunch?
But you got to factor in, are you going to discourage people too from buying? So I mean, yeah, we can jack up the price or raise the price, excuse me. But there's a fine line. But we also have to do a calculation, which we do next month, that tells us, we may be forced to increase it because there's this
Our last calculation last year was okay, but this year
we may have to, but it would be more based on that, the
cost adjustment.
The cost adjustment factor that they require us to do, the federal government does.
So when you say the federal government requires you to do this cost adjustment, is that based on the money that you're getting for the free and subsidized lunches?
Right, yeah. There's some formula that you put your cost in, and you come up with it.
And if we go over the number that
go over it, you can.
You can go over.
Yes.
So
no penalty.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I look at it, even over 180 days, if my kid ate lunch every single day, and we're talking about 15 cents, it's $27 a year. I mean, I'm not looking forward to spending, and I have 4 kids, 27 times 4. I'm not looking to spend another $100 a year. I don't feed them every single day, but my point being is that I'm not making them I'm not giving them lunch every day in the school system, but I mean, that's a small amount to bring the number up so that you guys break even, because I don't want to see us bringing in money from what should be on the education side to flatten out the numbers in the cafeteria.
Well, just for clarification for that, is that the money that and I agree with you, we don't want to take money from anywhere. But the money to subsidize this, if we needed to, is in the cafeteria account. It's not in the Board of Ed budget. So we would take it from the, there's, if you look at the document, there's a reserve.
Right, but I mean, one year there was a BOE contribution.
Yeah, because that was because there was a concern that the reserve was going to be gone the next year.
All right, well, it's already down to 100,000.
Yes.
Correct.
So,
You can't go many more years. We totally understand that.
I mean, I guess I'm sharing the same concerns as my fellow counselors up here. You know, I realize it's a moving target. You're never gonna come up right on zero, and this might even be marginally closer. You look at the overall budget revenue, and maybe it's not too far off. But I mean, again, I'm looking at it from the prospect of 15 cents a lunch. Couldn't we close the gap some more with that? Is there anything to prevent you from doing it in the middle of the school year?
No, there's nothing. I think that you have to be cognizant that not every family is in a situation to make those adjustments. And there are some families that are on the cusp of qualifying rather for free or reduced lunch. And at this point, because of where they are financially, they can afford lunch, paying for it without they don't qualify, so they're able to pay for it. But that extra 15 cents a day, and if they have 4 kids and they're on that cusp, that might mean that they can't no longer afford it. They wouldn't become free or reduced because that doesn't factor because their income is still their income. And then we lose that sale, but we also lose potentially that student getting a lunch for school. So it is a balance. It's a tough one. It's never, again, all the topics you brought up tonight are messy topics. And they're not just Wallingford messy topics, they're national messy topics. Food, school lunch, buses, special education, they're very difficult topics because there's so many different nuances to it. I think your point is well taken. The board has not set the prices officially for next year. We wait until the calculator is done. I think it's important that obviously Roxanne is here. I believe we have other board members in the audience. That's something that they could take back to that meeting and review. It might not be the 15 cents, but maybe it's 5 cents. Maybe it's 10 cents. At least get you closer to closing that gap. And that's what we've done in the past.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm looking for. And like I said, it's not like, gee, charge me some more money because I can't wait to spend more. But I can always tell them, look, instead of 2 lunches, we're going to start going down to 1 because that's what our budget's going to.
But that's what happens, and then that has an impact on sales, which then impacts your deficit also.
That's true, but one of the things
because we did do a calculation of that. If you every 5 cents, I think we stand to lose between 2 to 3% of sales annually. That was the calculation that we had done, and we got information.
You also don't have to buy the consumables either, so there is some degree of offset. I mean, one of the things that concerned me from the conversation earlier was you were talking about a cost ratio of about 40%. Food service, you need to be 30%.
Correct.
Or you're not good. And again, we're not making you guys a profit center, but at 40%, it's harder to get to that zero line.
No, absolutely. That's what I said earlier. I totally agree with you. The 30% is really where you want to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, my family's been doing it for 70 years here in town, so that's why I know that's the minimum number. We go there quite often.
Yeah. So no, I understand that, and again, I think that was the challenge, and that's why I brought up the food costs. There were some definitely food cost increases this year that threw it off whack.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to overemphasize it nor under. I mean, again, to be a narrow loss each year is, I don't want to say it's okay, but based on the overall size. You could be in a way worse situation. I would like to see us be just as marginal on the positive side, or at least closer to zero, because that becomes much more of a balance to the fact that, we don't want to see that fund dry up. We don't want to see something to come away from possibly the instructional side to subsidize the cafeteria.
No, totally. We don't even want the C+. We want a B+. Ideally, if we can make about 50,000 on this a year, which I think is doable, I really do, that would be fantastic. And I know that's not a lot of money, but it helps.
Yeah. All right, that was really all I had because, like I said, Craig had gotten to a lot of my questions earlier, so I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
No worries.
So, minor correction, you had other board members in the audience. I think
Oh,
you've outlasted them.
Thank you very much for that
Counselor
correction.
Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Jason, he's going to cover more of your questions now.
You know, I'm just looking at the math. You know, we heard tonight that certain people don't pay for education, and I understand that. But now we have an opportunity to have those individuals who do send children to the school to pay to feed their children. So 15 cents a day for one child is 75 cents a week, is $3.25 a month. And I mean, I did a 12-month calendar, but it isn't even a 12, it's an 8-month calendar or something like that. If it was a 12-month calendar, it'd be $39 for a year if it was 5 days a week. Really? I mean, it's a business decision, but somehow this money got into the reserve account. And 10 years ago, I think there was $500,000 there. I think there was.
Was it a half? I'd have to check that. I don't think it was a half.
There was.
Maybe
There was. There was. There was.
a
4 to 500, I would guess, because I looked at the audio.
There was a lot. What did you say?
4 to 500, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that money got there, not from a contribution from the taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
It was from selling lunches, not lunch and breakfast. It was selling lunches. So at one point, prior to 10 years ago, this was a business.
It was because you were able to
We
serve
were selling
fried
French
dough,
fries,
French dough, French fries.
cheeseburgers, hot dogs.
And remember, you were charging even less money.
Yeah.
So, and I thought we had this discussion before. What is the financial impact if you just tell the government no?
You have to cover the cost of all the free reduced lunch meals. Free
Okay,
reduced
so,
lunch meals.
so I'm looking, I think I have that line here. Is that reflected here? I thought I saw it here.
There's
It'd be under income, right?
revenue, federal and state.
What's federal aid and state aid? That's it?
I
Those
believe,
lines?
Correct.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
believe so.
Yeah.
So you would be looking at 785,000 or so.
Mr. Chairman, while they're thinking about that, I just want to point out, yes, the menu has changed because of nutritional issues, but we also have over 1,000 fewer students. So you no longer have the number of people there who would be tempted to buy lunch or not.
Good point. I mean,
That is-
I thank for that, but just the argument that we can't, there's gotta be some delta on the increase in price by pennies. I mean, I reasonably can't, I can't fathom that it would so decrease the amount of sales to have any real net effect here. But instead, essentially, we're relying upon the taxpayers to supplement this. And this reserve fund will be gone in the next, at the very most, 3 years. And then taxpayers are going to be paying for this. So,
Well,
anyway,
I think that the other option, though, and I know it's not a popular one, is that, and we've already investigated and we chose not to do it, is that you go with a company that guarantees you a profit.
Yep.
And then it doesn't become a taxpayer problem.
Yep.
That's the other option.
understood.
So I think that would be, from my work with the present board for 10 years, I think they would, unfortunately, while it might not be the best decision for some people in the community because they might be upset by that, that would be the business decision we would have to make.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think you're all set.
All right,
Thank you.
I'm gonna go grab the bus.
Good luck with that. Next and last tonight is Park and Rec. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
If you could just remind us who you are for the record.
Sure, John Gwalick, Director of Parks and Rec.
I'm Kenny Michaels, Recreation Program Specialist.
Also in the crowd is Dave Gilo, the Rec Commission Chairman, and Mike Savinelli, the Vice Chair.
Thanks for being here. What do you have for us?
1 second. So sure, if you would allow me just a couple minutes just to kind of go over my cover letter that I usually put out for you guys. This year's spending is 2.38% over last year's spending, but a large part of that is due to the some items that are going to be for Wallingford 350. So the actual increase would only be 1% over last year. A couple of projects that I highlight every year in my cover letter. The first one, and I'm happy to hear that hopefully it still makes it through the first phase of Grand Street Park redevelopment. The next one would be the Pregman Park Quad. This has been on my cover letter. This will be the third year in a row now. The place is seriously needs some rehabbing. Since we had moved junior football out of West Side Field, Pregman is going to be their new home. We've had the last couple of years, the backfield hasn't been finished yet by Public Works and Engineering. So there's been a lot of concentrated use inside the quad. So it's taken a beating. The new field hopefully will be finished and completed before the summer. I'm not sure if this fall will be too soon for it to be used. It might have to wait and go to next spring. But certainly, any consideration, if it's this year or next year, for that item number 2 would be great. I know that the parking lots at Community Lake Park, Loughbury, Woodhouse 1 and 2, I've talked with Steve Palermo from Public Works. I believe that those things are in their budget. They need to be repaired. The multi-use court at Westside Eagles is a popular multi-use court that's used by the neighborhood there. Hopefully that makes it into Public Works budget. Number 5 is Loughbury Park. When we had the storm a year ago, it damaged the backstop of the ball field, which is seldom used. So we opted, the Rec Department and Commission opted not to repair it. But also going up there, we have a pavilion that's aging that we'd like to update and possibly move. Public Works feels if they do that, it's not salvageable. So down the road, we're looking to kind of redevelop that park. The Doolittle Park Fieldhouse, there's been conversations over the years about taking it down, keeping the restrooms, the plumbing, and making it yet another open air pavilion at Doolittle Park, and cleaning up that area in the rear of the park.
Is that the building at the end of Henry Street there?
That's correct. And then the field house, most of the backstops are in another generation. One of the last few that have to be repaired would be the Community Lake one, but it's okay for this season. That's it.
Thank you. Councilor Shortell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, Kenny, thank you for everything you do. I just have a very quick question.
Sure.
And it just follows up on a conversation you and I had about community pool, the current community pool. About how much would it cost to keep it open through Labor Day, roughly?
So our calculations, if it's open for 3 more weeks, it's about $20,000. You'd have to check with Public Works. I believe it's $2,000 to $3,000 for chemicals, but I don't know what it costs for the management of the pump house.
So is that 20K? You're saying they could, that,
20K is for the staff.
just, that, thank you, okay, so there could be equipment costs on top of that.
So it could be 2,000 to 3,000 a week for the chemicals, and I'm not sure about the management part of that, because that's out of Public Works' budget.
Okay, is there any other variable, like, you know, insurance?
Not that I'm aware of.
So, okay, so basically,
The only other variable is checking with our pool supervisor that we have for this summer. We would be able to staff it fully for 1 more week. And then he felt that with the staff that we have this summer selected, if we had known prior to, we'd only be able to open it during the last 2 weeks, 2 to 7 during the week, but then 11 to 7 on the weekends. So it's just those 2 weeks, Monday through Friday, 2 to 7.
if you got that extra funding.
If you got the extra funding for the 3 weeks.
Got it, okay. All right, thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Yep. Counselor Zandri?
That was my question.
Counselor Morgenstein, did I see your hand?
You did, and what was my question? Oh, yes. Are you waiting for an ordinance from this body to be able to consider putting advertisements in parks?
It's been a discussion at our meetings. We didn't have an April meeting, but we have one coming up next week that it's on the agenda. So I know it's something that we're working towards.
I know you've been speaking with other towns, and it certainly seems like something that would be very beneficial. We certainly have, bigger businesses in town that you would think would want to be marketing. So you're really not sure what...
We haven't formalized anything yet, but when we
Yeah.
do, that we'll be coming back to the ordinance committee of the council and just to
Yeah.
have a meeting and discuss the
Yeah,
ideas.
I would encourage that we should be moving in that direction. That's all I had.
Okay.
Counselor Fishbein?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening.
Good evening.
Nice to see you. So, looking at your personnel requests, you requested a total of 101 individuals, but the document that I'm looking at reflects that the mayor obliterated your department. He approved no staffing.
Just noticed that.
Some people read the budget. So
So
you're-
it should be the department request.
okay, so as far as you know, all of your requests as far as personnel were met by the mayor?
Yes, and if you go look down at the accounts, it looks like the department request and the mayor approved that request or forwarded that request.
Yeah, I just can't tell because I don't have the component multiplied
Okay.
by persons, right?
Gotcha.
So, okay. Now, within the requests, there appears to be an increase in personnel.
So that was a housekeeping issue that we had discussed when I sat with the mayor and Jim Bowes. So in previous years, it should reflect the 16.
Oh,
Those are part-time people.
so this has been an ongoing,
Yes,
so, okay. So in previous years, you were, although we didn't approve 16 persons, that is
That's
what
the
was
number.
employed.
correct.
I don't know how that happens, but anyway. Looking at line 56736, purchase services custodial. It indicates that last year you asked for $2,500. That was what was appropriated, but nothing has been expended through the end of this year. So why is that?
So that line, back when we had a lot of different travel baseball and softball programs, the custodial line, because we were relying on Board of Ed fields, it was Board of Ed maintenance that would have to prepare and take care of those fields. So we had that money in there, so when we had requests for games on the weekend or during the week, it was an overtime issue with Board of Ed. So we'd make the request so that the fields can be used, can be prepped, can be safe, and Board of Ed would just bill our department through that line.
So am I to understand because?
There hasn't been any requests this past fall.
Yeah.
Or this past spring yet, but we're getting to that point in this season when the high school season's over. All the other travel programs starting at the end of May when the high school season's over. So there'll be probably some expenditures out of that in the month of June.
Okay.
But that used to be a higher number. It's been decreased over the years because there's less teams using it or making the requests.
Okay, and then I noticed the symphony, line 58210. I mean, maybe I'm reading something wrong here, but it appears that number is doubling.
So that's part of the Wallingford 350. If you should have gotten the discussion page of the budget.
Well, I did flip through. I didn't see. I saw your cover letter.
So yeah, so the contribution Wallingford Symphony Orchestra, it's an increase of $8,885, which is their typical contribution annually. This increase is due in part because of the Wallingford 350 celebration. They're going to be doing I guess part of the symphony will be utilized for the gala ball June 27th, 2020.
Maybe I can help a little bit. It's unclear at this point exactly who will be doing that. The money is available. At one point, it was expected the symphony would do it. I'm not sure the symphony will, but they will need live music. So it may or may not be the Wallingford Symphony. The one concert is July 4th coming up. That's a concert they put on, a free concert for the community. And the remaining money, if they're part of the 2020 celebration, then there's money there for that. They may not be able to do it.
So
And we would need other money for whoever else is doing it.
So it's a matter of timing, I guess, that it's shown in this budget because July 4, 2019 would be the next fiscal year budget. So the appropriation for the Wallingford Symphony, that would be the $8,085 for them to perform that day. And then at the end of the fiscal year, June 27th or something like that, 2020, would potentially be this other performance, and that's what the rest of the money is for.
That's
what the rest of the money, and again, it
That's the
says
plan.
Wallingford Symphony, but they won't receive the money if they don't do it. It may be someone else.
Okay. But then I notice in the backup that there's a representation that this concert will replace the July 2020 concert of 2021. So that would mean that we're planning on having a concert for the Wallingford 350, but then not having a 4th of July concert the following year.
2020, correct.
Right, that's correct. If the Wallingford Symphony does this, then we would not be budgeting twice or three times, in effect, twice in one calendar year. If they don't do it, that's another issue, but we are not funding fireworks for that July 4th either. There will be a fireworks as part of the 2020 celebration.
So I would expect that this is an administration decision to cancel the Independence Day concert that we've had for years and years. Is that my understanding?
That's correct because of the expenditure of funds.
But
We're having within a few days the expenditure of two events, and since we're putting money into the 2020 celebration, which is fireworks as well, certainly we haven't been funding the fireworks, And I don't think it's proper really to be funding the symphony orchestra twice and then another time just a week later.
Are we still going with this concept of having a parade that's gonna cost $150,000 around this Wallingford 350 event?
There's a week-long series of events.
So the parade.
The parade is also one of those.
And
June
the-
20.
Yes, the last time we sat here and talked about budgets last year, it was represented to us. It was estimated, there was a desire of some people in this town and approved to spend approximately $150,000 on a parade. Are we still on that course?
Well, there's $70,000 in this budget on the social service line, I believe it is, for the parade. That's in combination with $45,000 that was budgeted in the current year. And that would be money for the parade.
So I don't understand why we can't take $8,000 of that and just have the symphony that we have had for all of these years, whomever it's put on by. I've got a kazoo, but
Problem solved.
these are the kinds of things we find out at budget time that are quite disturbing. But I am totally opposed to canceling the Independence Day free concert.
And again, it may be that the symphony orchestra is not going to be part of the 2020. The last I heard, which was today, they probably will not, which will mean we will budget again for the symphony orchestra the following budget year for the July 4th. This money would not go to them. This would be for whatever music is provided for the 2020.
But I'm just going by what I'm looking at, the representation that's being made to us is this concert will replace the July 2020 concert of fiscal year 2021.
And I'm telling you that is not accurate.
Okay. So, okay. The line 58243 appears to be a new line. It says, girls fast pitch softball.
Yes.
So where does that come
For
from?
years, they were receiving $3,000. Their league participation went severely down 4 or 5 years ago, and their league president at the time didn't request, so we took the money out of the budget, and they're having a little bit of a renaissance with new leadership and growing. So I didn't fully fund it at the 3,000 like all the other leagues, but felt that the 1,500 would be prudent to help them out.
So how does that come to be? Because I've asked for years that any entity that's not directly affiliated with the town who wants money from the town is supposed to submit some sort of correspondence, their budget, what the money's going to be used for, and what will be the impact upon the entity if they don't get the money. I would expect there was some sort of conversation.
They make letter requests. I can get those for you.
So what, when I've got the senior citizen who calls me, why are we giving money to this? What's going to be the impact to this entity if the town does not make this donation? Are they going to fold? They have less
They
gains?
certainly won't fold. They'll probably have to do less without. They do their own fundraising. They have their league registrations. They get donations like everything else. Trying to be consistent and help them in some way.
I understand, and we've had this discussion. Sure. Love hockey, live for hockey, but I know that the Hawks mostly come from Cheshire, and I know that Cheshire doesn't give them any money.
So they haven't been receiving their money the last couple of years, and they've been having some changes in their office structure, and we constantly try to, and we make calls to them to say, look, this money's available. And for the last 2 years, they haven't, it's going back to the general fund.
Yeah.
We're at the point where we're ready to say, someone's got to make a decision here.
And for that reason, if you think about the amount of time that you spend on this,
Right.
if we put the onus on them to ask and actually substantiate their request, you'd have more time on your hands, right? Anyway, line 58735, which is titled operating expenses.
Correct.
What's, so last year, just to recap, $21,000 was requested and allowed, but this year only $3,800 has been expended.
So there's been considerable amount of ordering and encumbrances to the tune of about $18,234. We still have a few more things that are planned to purchase before the end of the year for certain programs, and there will be $69 left in that account. Just the timing of when we're purchasing things for the summer.
Well, I didn't hear that. It'll be how much?
$69 left.
Okay. Well, because even, you said there was about $23,000 in invoices that have yet to be.
No, right now we've spent $18,234.
Okay, which would put us over budget. Not that I'm.
No, I'm sorry. So at the actual that you're reading, the 3,813 at January 31st,
Yes.
as of today, that number has changed from 3,813 to 18,234.
Okay, so it's not in addition to.
Correct.
It's cumulative. Okay. Thank you. And that's all that I had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Councilor Morgenstein.
Yeah, just a quick swing back to the 350. It was represented to us that a lot of the expenses for the 350 were going to be coming in donations, and of course we don't have an ability to predict that. What is the mechanism for us budgeting these bigger numbers, but then if they come as donations for that money to go where, if it then...
I don't know if I can answer that one.
Maybe
We have
Mr. Bose
we
would
have
love-
one role
yeah.
of that particular week is Friday Youth Day.
Well, we talked all about the concert.
The concert and the parade are the only two areas of funding in this budget right now. The committee co-chairs have a variety of funding sources, but until they come forward and request either seed money and then get reimbursed, until we see that, I don't know how to budget for it.
Right, that's not my question. So my question is, so we're budgeting to cancel one concert and have it a few days later, and we're budgeting an amount of money for that, and we're giving a certain amount of money for the parade. If funding comes through that covers those expenses, what is the mechanism for our budget recouping that?
There's, to my knowledge, there's no expectation of any money coming in to cover the $70,000 on the parade that's in the budget, or the symphony orchestra.
Right, so
Symphony and orchestra might be part of the 2020. It probably will not at the point that I understand. The money that is here for the concert for July 4th time period is the same amount of money we've been providing them every year for I don't know how many years.
Right, so I'll go on the record as standing with Mr. Fishbein that the July 4th is attended by different types of people, and that we have a pretty grand parade planned, and that amount of input to the parade when we are going out to donations we'll have to consider. Okay, and not really...
That would really be for next year's budget anyway.
Well,
2020,
Correct.
Yeah,
if you're talking about
the parade piece.
The 2020 parade is in June. The July 4th will be the next fiscal year. That will be the 2021 fiscal year.
Right, okay, I got it, thank you.
Anything else? Go ahead.
can I just I just want to massage that a little bit. So we have a concert this Independence Day, and then there's this week at the end of next year, at the end of June. If the Wallingford Symphony plays during that week as part of those festivities, it would be, Mayor, your intent not to have them, like they're not available?
Well, I would, if I'm still exercising judgments on it, I would not support in a budget another sum of money having basically doubled what they would have received for that year. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so
Now,
I'm just
what I'm understanding now from them is it is unlikely, I believe, that they will want to do anything at the 2020, which would mean that we aren't doubling up on them in this coming year, and certainly having them play again on July 4th, 2020 would be appropriate.
Okay, so I guess I can expect that those people that we're not part of, they're making their desires known as to what this event is going to encapsulate, have shown some desire to have music, a concert during that week.
No, this is not a concert. It's music at the ball.
Okay, music at the ball. So let's just say, since that desire has been expressed, that an alternative vendor is hired. The New Haven Symphony Orchestra is instead performing at the ball. What would be the status in that case with regard to the Wallingford Symphony and the administration's?
And my view would be that would be a new year, and we would want them to be playing for Independence Day in the 2021 budget. July of 2020, it would be the 2021 budget.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand here. Mary, you'd be adverse to them playing at the ball and giving a concert? That same group, but you would...
Right, because they will have already played in 2019 for the community Independence Day.
Okay, okay, but you would not be adverse to a different symphony group playing at the ball, which I would expect would approximately be the same amount of money.
Well, I don't think it probably will be the same amount of money, because for live entertainment, unless it's a much larger ballroom than I can picture, a full symphony orchestra is far different than what you would typically have as live music for dance and ball. But I'm making a lot of assumptions there. There's a lot of moving parts to this. All I can tell you is what I know at this point.
Okay,
I would doubt very much you could have the full symphony orchestra to provide dance music and entertainment at the ball.
Understood. Okay, and I think the New Haven Symphony is more, it costs more than the Wallingford Symphony too, but okay, I'm just trying to, this is the first I've heard of this, so. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else for Park and Rec? Thank you for your time and patience.
Thanks, guys.
No problem.
Just let me, John, you indicated how much would it be for the 3 weeks? What was the total on that?
So for staff, it's about $21,000. Speaking with the chemical company, it's between $2,000 and $3,000 a week for chemicals.
So two or 3,000 a week. So that's 3 times 3 is 9,000.
Correct, and then I don't know what his management fee is of the pump house and managing that.
So 9,000 plus the 21 gives you 30,000, something over 30,000.
Right.
Okay.
All right, there being no further business, Councilor Fishbein moves we adjourn. Councilor Shortell seconds. Councilor Morgenstein votes yes.
Yes.
And we are adjourned.
Thanks, guys.